The eviction notice had been taped to the apartment door for 3 days before Maya Chen finally peeled it off. The adhesive left a sticky residue on the chipped paint, a mark that would outlast her tenancy by weeks. 30 days to vacate. The words blurred as she read them for the 5th time, as if repetition might change the outcome or reveal some loophole her exhausted mind had missed. Behind her, in the cramped one-bedroom that had cost $1,400 a month she could no longer afford, 6-year-old Lily sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, arranging her collection of fabric scraps into patterns only she understood. The child had inherited her grandmother's eye for textiles, for the way colors spoke to each other, for the subtle language of weave and texture. Not that it mattered now. Maya's mother had been dead for 8 months, and the inheritance had been nothing but debt and a storage unit full of industrial sewing machines nobody wanted. Maya folded the notice into precise thirds and tucked it into her purse beside the other impossible documents. Medical bills from Lily's emergency room visit last winter when her asthma had flared into something terrifying. Student loan statements that arrived monthly like clockwork, each one a reminder that her sociology degree had prepared her for exactly nothing that paid a living wage. The child support agreement that Victor had signed but never honored, disappearing into the California sprawl with promises that evaporated like morning fog. The apartment in Oakland's Fruitvale district had been temporary from the start, a place to land after Victor left, after her mother died, after the textile import business her mother had built over 40 years collapsed under the weight of changing markets and predatory loans. Maya had grown up surrounded by fabric, by the sound of industrial machines humming through the night, by her mother's hands moving with the precision of someone who understood that quality meant survival in an industry built on disposability. But understanding quality didn't prevent bankruptcy. It didn't stop suppliers from demanding payment. It didn't keep buyers from canceling orders when cheaper options emerged from overseas factories that paid workers pennies and shipped in volumes that crushed small American operations. Maya pulled her laptop from its second-hand case and opened the browser to a site she'd been avoiding for weeks. County auction listings. Government seized properties sold to anyone desperate or foolish enough to bid. Most were disasters. Abandoned lots in forgotten towns, structures so damaged that demolition exceeded their value, land with environmental contamination that made it legally untouchable. She scrolled past mobile homes, missing walls, past storefronts in ghost towns where the population had dwindled to double digits, past rural parcels too remote for utilities. The listings read like catastrophes waiting to be purchased. Buyer beware. As is condition. No warranties. No inspections. No second chances. Then she saw it. Lot 447. Industrial structure. Approximately 3,200 square meters. Former ribbon manufacturing facility. Structural collapse. East wing. Property condemned. Immediate renovation or demolition required. Located in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Population 3,800. Opening bid $500. Maya's finger hovered over the trackpad. Pennsylvania. 3,000 miles from Oakland's impossible rent and judgment. 3,000 miles from the apartment complex where neighbors whispered about the single mother who couldn't keep her life together. 3,000 miles from Maya's mother's creditors who still called monthly, demanding payment from an estate that held nothing but industrial equipment worth less than scrap metal. Millbrook. She Googled it. A town that had thrived on textile manufacturing from 1880 through 1970, then withered when factories closed and moved south, then overseas. Population had peaked at 12,000 in 1965. Now fewer than 4,000 remained. The main street's storefronts showed vacancies outnumbering businesses. The elementary school had consolidated with 2 neighboring districts. This was a place where people left, not arrived. But the property listing included one photograph. A brick building, 4 stories tall, with ornate Victorian architecture that spoke of a time when manufacturing was craft, when factories were built to last centuries, when owners invested in beauty because their names went on the door and their reputations lived in the quality of what they produced. The east wing had collapsed. Maya could see it in the image. The roof had caved inward, taking 2 floors with it. Bricks littered the ground. Windows gaped like missing teeth. But the west wing stood intact, and something about those solid walls called to Maya's engineering mind. The degree she'd abandoned after 2 years when money ran out and life intervened. She checked her bank balance. $847.23. Rent was due in 6 days. She had enough for this month, or enough to buy a factory 3,000 miles away that nobody wanted. Lily appeared beside her, small hands resting on Maya's shoulder. "Mama, are you looking at houses again?" Maya turned, meeting her daughter's eyes. Brown like Victor's, but holding a seriousness he'd never possessed. Lily had learned too young that stability was temporary, that plans changed without warning, that sometimes mothers cried in bathrooms with the water running to muffle the sound. "Something like that, baby. How would you feel about living somewhere different? Somewhere with lots of space?" Lily's face lit with cautious hope. "Could I have my own room? With walls that don't share with loud people?" The apartment's thin walls transmitted every argument, every television, every intimate sound from neighbors who lived too close and cared too little about who heard their lives unfolding. Maya had tried explaining to the building manager, but noise complaints required evidence, required documentation, required energy Maya couldn't spare when survival consumed everything. "Yes, sweetheart, your own room. Maybe even 2 rooms if you wanted an art studio. What about friends? Would there be other kids?" Maya hesitated. Millbrook's declining population probably meant fewer children, older residents, a town slowly emptying as young people sought opportunities elsewhere. But Oakland hadn't been kind to Lily either. The girl struggled to make friends, to navigate social hierarchies that formed early and excluded anyone perceived as different, as poor, as other. "We'll find out together. It would be an adventure." Lily nodded, trusting in the way children trust when they have no choice, when their world is defined entirely by adult decisions they can't control or influence. She returned to her fabric scraps, arranging them into a sunset pattern. Oranges bleeding into purples, yellows fading to deep blue. Maya looked at the auction listing again. Bidding closed in 4 hours. She read the terms carefully. Minimum bid, $500. Buyer responsible for all back taxes, estimated at $2,200. Buyer responsible for immediate structural assessment and remediation plan filed within 30 days. Failure to comply results in forfeiture of property with no refund. This was insanity. She knew nothing about Pennsylvania, nothing about ribbon factories, nothing about structural engineering beyond what she'd learned in 2 years of college classes a decade ago. She'd be buying blindly, gambling what little money remained on a property that might be worthless, might be dangerous, might be unsalvageable. But staying in Oakland meant eviction, meant homelessness, meant Lily growing up in shelters or worse, in the car Maya was 2 payments from losing. It meant surrender to the inevitable slide from struggling to drowning, from poor to destitute, from trying to giving up. Maya created an account on the auction site. She entered her debit card information with hands that trembled slightly. She set her maximum bid at $700. If someone else wanted this disaster more, they could have it. If not, Maya Chen was about to become the unlikely owner of a collapsed ribbon factory in a dying Pennsylvania town. The auction timer counted down. 4 hours became 3 became 2. Maya made dinner, rice and beans again, stretched with vegetables from the discount bin. She helped Lily with homework, simple addition problems the child solved easily, math coming naturally the way patterns did. She supervised bath time, reading 3 chapters of Charlotte's Web while Lily's hair dried, their nightly ritual, the one stability Maya could still provide. At 9:47 p.m., Maya's phone buzzed. Email notification. Auction closing in 10 minutes. She opened the browser. Lot 447. Current bid, $500. 1 bidder. Maya Chen. Nobody else wanted it. Nobody else saw potential or possibility or even disaster worth gambling on. The factory was hers if she did nothing, if she let the timer expire, if she accepted the commitment. Lily had fallen asleep, clutching the stuffed rabbit Victor had given her before he left, back when he still pretended fatherhood meant something beyond biology. Maya watched her daughter breathe, chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of childhood, unburdened by the calculations keeping Maya awake. The timer hit 0. Confirmation email arrived instantly. Congratulations. You are the winning bidder for Lot 447. Payment due within 24 hours. Property transfer documents will be mailed to the address on file. Maya had just spent $700 on a factory she'd never seen in a town she'd never visited, gambling everything on the belief that catastrophe might be preferable to slow suffocation. She didn't sleep that night. She researched Millbrook instead, learning its history through census data and historical society archives digitized by volunteers. The town had manufactured ribbons from 1885 through 1989, supplying decorative trim for clothing, crafts, packaging. At its peak, 15 factories employed nearly 8,000 workers. The buildings had been architectural showpieces, brick structures with arched windows and detailed cornices, built by families who believed their legacy would outlast them. Then polyester replaced silk. Then automation replaced skilled labor. Then overseas manufacturing replaced American production. By 1990, every factory had closed. Population dropped 40% in 20 years. Property values collapsed. Main Street emptied. Millbrook became one more casualty of economic transformation that enriched distant shareholders while destroying communities that had built themselves around manufacturing. But something about those Victorian brick buildings called to Maya. Her mother had believed in craftsmanship, in the idea that quality endured beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. Those factories represented a time when people made things, when work meant creation rather than service, when communities built themselves around the dignity of skilled labor producing tangible goods. Maybe that was naive. Maybe that era was gone forever, replaced by algorithms and gig economies and the fiction that everyone could code their way to prosperity. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something valuable remained in those abandoned buildings. Something beyond bricks and mortar, something about resilience and adaptation and refusal to let decline be destiny. The next morning, Maya drove to the storage unit where her mother's equipment waited. She'd been paying $200 monthly to preserve machines she couldn't sell, couldn't use, couldn't bear to abandon. Industrial sewing machines designed for fabric production. Cutting tables with precision measurements. Spools of thread in every color. Bolts of material her mother had been saving for orders that never came. Maya ran her hand across a Singer industrial machine, feeling the cold metal, remembering her mother's hands guiding fabric through with practiced precision. This equipment represented 40 years of work, of building a business from nothing, of proving that an immigrant woman with limited English and unlimited determination could create something lasting. Except it hadn't lasted. The business had died with her mother, crushed under debt and market forces too large for one person to resist. But the machines remained, waiting for someone who understood their value, who saw possibility in industrial equipment designed for a manufacturing era that supposedly no longer existed. Maya made 3 phone calls. First, to a moving company specializing in long-distance transport. The quote for shipping 20 industrial machines and associated equipment to Pennsylvania was $4,100, more than she had. She negotiated down to $3,200 by agreeing to flexible delivery dates and providing her own packing. Second, to her landlord. She explained she'd be leaving early, forfeiting her security deposit, requesting release from the lease 3 weeks ahead of the eviction notice. He agreed immediately, probably grateful to avoid legal proceedings. The deposit had been $1,400. Gone, absorbed into the cost of starting over. Third, to her best friend Carrie, asking to borrow $2,000. Carrie had been present for everything: the divorce, her mother's death, the bankruptcy. She'd offered money before, loans Maya had refused out of pride that now seemed foolish. This time Maya accepted, promising repayment within 6 months, knowing that promise might be as empty as Victor's child support commitments. By noon, Maya had $3,847.23 in available funds after the factory purchase cleared. The movers required $1,600 upfront. Back taxes on the Pennsylvania property would consume $2,200. That left $47.23 for gas to drive 3,000 miles with a 6-year-old and whatever possessions fit in a 2008 Honda Civic with 187,000 miles. She told Lily that afternoon, framing it as adventure rather than desperation, emphasizing space and possibilities rather than acknowledging the dozen ways this could fail catastrophically. Lily listened with the careful attention of a child who'd learned to read between adult words, to hear the fear beneath manufactured optimism. Will we be safe there, Mama? The question landed with weight Maya hadn't anticipated. Safe. As if safety was achievable. As if any place could guarantee security when systems were designed to push people like them to margins and keep them there. I'll make sure we're safe, baby. Whatever that takes. They packed over 3 days, winnowing possessions to essentials. Clothes, Lily's school records, photos, the fabric scraps Lily treasured, Maya's mother's recipe book, pages stained with soy sauce and sesame oil, written in Mandarin characters Maya could barely read. A few books, 1 pot, 1 pan, basic utensils. Everything else, furniture, decorations, accumulated debris of failed stability, got left behind or donated. The storage unit took longer. Maya wrapped each machine carefully, protecting mechanisms that had survived 4 decades but might not survive rough handling. She packed thread spools, cutting tools, measurement equipment. She found things she'd forgotten. Her mother's business licenses, faded photographs of the warehouse her mother had operated, order forms from department stores that had once carried her textiles. At the bottom of a filing cabinet, Maya discovered an envelope addressed to her in her mother's handwriting. No stamp. Never mailed. The paper felt heavy, expensive, the kind her mother used for important documents. Inside, a letter dated 3 months before her mother's death. Maya, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for the debt. I'm sorry the business failed. I tried to build something you could inherit, something stable. Instead, I leave you problems. But I also leave you knowledge. Your grandmother taught me textiles in Guangzhou. I taught you. This knowledge doesn't disappear because factories close. It waits for someone who understands its value. Don't give up on making things. Don't let them convince you that only technology matters, that only code has worth. The world will always need fabric, need textiles, need people who understand how threads become beauty. I believe in you. I believe you can build what I couldn't finish. Your mother. Maya folded the letter carefully, vision blurred with tears she'd been holding since the funeral. Her mother had believed in her, had seen potential Maya couldn't see in herself, had left this message knowing Maya would need it exactly when she found it. On their final morning in Oakland, Maya loaded the Civic while Lily took one last walk around the apartment complex, saying goodbye to the playground where she played alone more often than with others, to the corner store where they'd bought groceries, to the neighbor's cat who sometimes visited their patio. The drive east took 5 days. They stayed in budget motels that charged $49 plus tax, places where breakfast meant packaged pastries and weak coffee, where parking lots held other travelers who looked as desperate as Maya felt. They played road trip games, counted license plates, listened to audiobooks from the library's digital collection. Somewhere in Nebraska, Lily asked, "Mama, what if nobody likes us in Pennsylvania?" Maya glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror. "Then we'll like each other, and that will be enough. What if the factory is too broken to fix? Then we'll learn how to fix broken things. What if we run out of money?" Maya didn't have a good answer for that one. "Then we'll figure something out. We always do." Pennsylvania appeared gradually, flat farmland giving way to rolling hills, mountains emerging in the distance. They crossed into the state at sunset, sky burning orange and purple behind ridgelines that looked ancient and patient, indifferent to human struggles unfolding at their feet. Millbrook announced itself with a weathered sign. "Welcome to Millbrook." Founded 1843. Population 3,847. Someone had spray painted over the population number, correcting it downward, 3,512. Even the official optimism couldn't keep pace with decline. The main street looked exactly like its Google Street View images, but worse. More vacancies, more graffiti, more evidence of a town slowly surrendering to economic forces it couldn't resist. A diner remained open, lights glowing warm against gathering darkness. A hardware store, a bar called The Mills, and that looked like it had been there since the factories were running. Maya followed the GPS to 847 Industrial Avenue. The address existed on a street that dead-ended at a chain-link fence marking what had once been a manufacturing district. 5 brick buildings stood in various states of decay, most with boarded windows, all with condemned signs posted on doors nobody monitored. The Ribbon Factory was the largest, a 4-story Victorian masterpiece that had aged from grandeur into catastrophe. The West Wing looked stable, its brickwork intact, windows broken but walls solid. The East Wing had collapsed exactly as the listing described. Roof caved in, top 2 floors pancaked on lower levels, bricks scattered across what had once been a loading area. But the architecture, even in collapse, even in abandonment, the building held beauty. Arched windows with keystones carved in decorative patterns, cornices with geometric designs, brickwork that varied in color and texture, creating visual interest without compromising structure. This had been built by people who cared about aesthetics, who believed that industrial buildings could be monuments to craft and community. Maya parked in front of the West Wing entrance. The door hung crooked on broken hinges, padlock cut by someone who'd already looted anything valuable. She told Lily to wait in the car, doors locked, engine running for heat. "I'm just checking quickly. 5 minutes. If I'm not back in 6, honk the horn." Lily nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with apprehension that mirrored Maya's own. Inside, the factory opened into a vast space, approximately 50 meters deep and 30 wide. Support columns rose at regular intervals, cast iron with decorative capitals that had been painted green decades ago, now flaking and rusted. The concrete floor was cracked but level, sloping slightly toward drains designed to handle industrial runoff. Enough light came through broken windows for Maya to see that someone had been living here. Sleeping bags in one corner, empty bottles scattered, graffiti covering lower walls where spray paint could reach. But the squatters had left recently, abandoning the space to cold that November brought to Pennsylvania. Maya walked the perimeter, her engineering training resurging despite years of disuse. The walls were solid, double brick construction with headers visible at regular intervals. Load-bearing. Original. The roof joists showed water damage, but most remained intact, Victorian-era timber that had been cut from old-growth forests and would outlast anything modern construction offered. Windows could be replaced. Floors cleaned. Walls repaired. The West Wing was salvageable if someone had money, time, and knowledge she possessed in theory but had never tested in practice. She found stairs leading up, wooden treads worn smooth by generations of workers climbing to upper floors where ribbon had been woven, dyed, finished, packaged. Each floor measured the same as the ground level. Vast open spaces designed for industrial equipment and workers moving between stations. On the 4th floor, Maya stopped. Someone had painted a mural covering an entire wall, visible only from this height. It showed women at looms, hands moving through warp and weft, creating patterns that became fabric that became beauty. The artist had worked in colors that had faded but not disappeared, blues and reds and golds that caught what little light penetrated broken windows. Beneath the mural, text in faded letters, built by hands that honor craft, maintained by those who respect quality, abandoned by forces beyond our control, remembered by any who understand that making matters. Maya photographed the mural, then the floor, then the structural elements she'd need to document for the assessment report required within 30 days. She'd need a structural engineer to officially evaluate safety, but her preliminary judgment said the West Wing could be saved with investment she didn't have in time that was already running out. Back at the car, Lily had drawn pictures in the fog her breath made on the windows. stick figures representing the two of them, standing beside a building, holding hands. Above them, a sun with rays extending in all directions. Can we go inside tomorrow, Mama? I want to see. Tomorrow, baby. Tonight, we need to find somewhere to sleep. The Millbrook Motor Lodge charged $42 per night, weekly rate $210. The room smelled of old cigarettes and cleaning products that couldn't quite mask decades of transient occupancy. But the bed was clean, the heater worked, and the door locked. Maya had stayed in worse. They ate dinner from a gas station down the street. Sandwiches that cost $6 each, chips, orange juice. Lily did homework at the small table, working through reading comprehension questions about a story where a family moved to a new house and made friends with neighbors who baked cookies and organized welcome parties. Do you think our neighbors will be nice? Lily asked. I hope so, but even if they're not, we'll be okay. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Maya sat on the bathroom floor with her laptop, calculating numbers that refused to add up favorably. The moving truck would arrive in 4 days with equipment worth maybe $15,000 if she could find buyers, which seemed unlikely in a town where manufacturing had died 40 years ago. Back taxes of $2,200 were due in 2 weeks. The structural assessment would cost at least $800. She had $47.23. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. Heard you bought the old Hartley Ribbon Factory. You planning to reopen it or tear it down? Either way, town's interested. Welcome to Millbrook. Chief Davies, Millbrook PD. Maya stared at the message, trying to decode its intent. Welcome or warning? Genuine interest or subtle threat? She typed back, planning to assess and renovate. Hope to contribute to the community. The response came immediately. Good luck. You'll need it. Nobody's been able to make a go of those buildings in 30 years. But we're rooting for you. Maya set the phone down, unsure whether to feel encouraged or terrified. The police chief was watching. The town knew she'd arrived. Expectations were already forming, judgments already being made about whether this outsider could succeed where everyone else had failed. She opened a new document and began writing. Hartley Ribbon Factory Renovation Plan, Phase 1. She had no idea what would go in that document, what phases would follow, how she'd fund any of it. But her mother had taught her that making things began with planning, that creation required vision before it required resources. Maya typed until exhaustion overcame anxiety, words flowing without clear direction, but with determination that felt like the only asset she possessed. She didn't know if she could save this factory, didn't know if Millbrook would accept them, didn't know if the machines her mother left would ever run again. But she knew how to try. She knew how to work. She knew how to protect Lily and make the impossible seem achievable long enough for her daughter to believe they'd survive whatever came next. And sometimes, in the moment before everything either succeeded or collapsed entirely, trying was the only option available. The only difference between catastrophe and transformation was whether you'd prepared adequately for the moment when everything changed. Maya closed her laptop and went to bed beside her daughter, listening to Lily breathe, counting each exhale like a promise that tomorrow would arrive and they'd still be together, still fighting, still building something from nothing, because that's what people did when the alternative was surrender. Outside, Millbrook settled into darkness, a town full of ghosts and memories, waiting to see if this stranger could succeed where generations had failed, or if she'd just become one more cautionary tale about foolish dreams and insufficient resources. The morning came too early, sunlight pressing through thin motel curtains that did nothing to block the Pennsylvania dawn. Maya woke to Lily already dressed, sitting cross-legged on the other bed with her fabric scraps spread around her like a textile galaxy, arranging patterns with the focused intensity she brought to anything involving color and texture. Mama, can we go see the factory now? I want to explore. Maya checked her phone. 6:47 a.m. Too early for anything in Millbrook to be open, but late enough that sitting in the motel room would drive them both toward restlessness that had nowhere productive to go. Let me get dressed. We'll get breakfast first, then go look. The gas station sold coffee that tasted like burnt plastic and donuts that had probably been delivered frozen weeks ago. Maya bought 2 coffees anyway, needing the caffeine more than caring about quality, and a half-dozen donuts that Lily examined with the skepticism of a child who'd learned not to expect much for budget food. They ate in the car, watching Millbrook wake up around them. A few trucks rumbled past, heading somewhere with purpose Maya envied. An elderly woman walked a small dog that looked as tired as its owner. The diner's lights came on, and through its windows Maya could see the silhouettes of early morning regulars claiming their usual booths, their usual routines, their usual conversations. "Do you think they know about us?" Lily asked, watching the diner. "Probably. Small towns talk. The police chief already texted me last night." "What did he say?" "Welcome to Millbrook. That will need luck." Lily considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "Do you think we're lucky, Mama?" Maya looked at her daughter, 6 years old, displaced from the only home she'd known, sleeping in motels, eating gas station food, trusting completely in a mother who just gambled their last money on a collapsed factory. "I think we make our own luck, baby. We work hard and stay smart and refuse to give up. That's better than luck." The factory looked different in daylight, more damaged, but also more magnificent. The Victorian architecture revealed itself fully in morning sun. The decorative brickwork patterns, the carved stone accents, the massive arched windows that had once filled the interior with natural light. This had been built to impress, to stand as a monument to industrial ambition and civic pride. But it had also been abandoned to entropy. Graffiti covered the lower walls in layers spanning decades. Windows were systematically broken, some recently, most long ago. The loading dock concrete had cracked and heaved, weeds growing through splits wide enough to lose a shoe. The east wing's collapse looked even worse in daylight. 2 floors of Victorian craftsmanship reduced to rubble that nobody had bothered clearing. Maya parked and grabbed her phone, opening the camera app. She needed to document everything for the structural assessment, needed evidence of what existed and what would need repair. But she also wanted Lily to see this place at its worst, to understand what they were working with before any transformation began. "Stay close to me. Don't go near the collapsed section. Don't touch anything that looks unstable. If I say run, you run. Understand?" Lily nodded, clutching Maya's hand with fierce grip that spoke of fears the child wouldn't voice. They entered through the west wing's broken door, stepping into the vast ground floor Maya had examined last night. In daylight, details emerged that darkness had hidden. The floor wasn't just concrete. Sections showed terrazzo work, decorative patterns made from marble chips set in cement, polished to a shine that decades of neglect couldn't entirely erase. Someone had invested in beauty for a factory floor, had believed that workers deserved something beyond pure utility. "Mama, look." Lily pointed to one wall where the graffiti was older, faded almost to illegibility. Beneath spray-painted tags, older text showed through, painted directly on brick, probably original to the building's operation. Hartley and Daughters Ribbon Manufactory. Established 1885. Quality through craft. Maya photographed it, then noticed something else. The painted text wasn't just decorative. It was directional, with arrows pointing to different sections. Weaving, 2nd floor. Dyeing, 3rd floor. Finishing, 4th floor. Shipping, ground level east. The factory had been organized vertically, with raw materials entering at the bottom and finished products emerging at the top. A logical flow that minimized material transport and maximized efficiency. Maya's engineering mind appreciated the design, even as she mourned its abandonment. They climbed to the 2nd floor, wooden stairs creaking under their combined weight, but holding firm. The space here matched the ground floor's dimensions. Massive, open, columns supporting a ceiling that showed water damage but remained structurally intact. And here, evidence of the factory's purpose remained. Against one wall, 4 industrial looms stood in silent ranks, too large and heavy for looters to steal, too obsolete for anyone to want. They were Victorian-era machines, cast iron frames with wooden components, designed for weaving ribbon in widths from 1 inch to 6. The mechanisms were rusted, the wooden parts warped from moisture, but the fundamental structure remained. Lily approached one loom with careful reverence, running her small hand along its frame. Grandma had pictures of machines like this. She said her grandmother used to weave silk in China on looms that looked like this. Maya joined her daughter, examining the machine more closely. These were jacquard looms, she realized, sophisticated devices that used punch cards to control complex weaving patterns. The same technology that had inspired early computer programming. These machines represented the cutting edge of 19th century textile technology. Your great-great-grandmother would have understood these machines, Maya said softly. The principles are the same. Warp threads held under tension, weft threads woven through to create patterns. The technology changes, but the craft stays constant. Could we fix them? Could we make them work again? Maya wanted to say yes, wanted to promise her daughter that these machines would come back to life, that the factory would operate again, that they'd resurrect something beautiful from this decay. But honesty required acknowledging limits. Maybe someday. Right now, we need to make the building safe. Then we figure out what comes next. They continued upward. The third floor showed evidence of the dyeing operation. Massive vats still bolted to reinforce floor sections, drain systems designed to handle chemical runoff, ventilation ducts that would have pulled toxic fumes outside. The walls here showed staining in rainbow patterns where decades of dye work had left permanent marks, blues bleeding into reds, yellows mixing with purples, creating abstract art that no human had deliberately designed. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, "like someone painted it on purpose. Industrial accidents can be beautiful, though the people working here probably didn't think so when they were cleaning up spills." On the fourth floor, they found the finishing area and the mural Maya had photographed last night. In daylight, more details emerged. The women depicted weren't generic figures. They had individual faces, different ages, distinct expressions. Someone had painted real people, had memorialized workers by name in tiny text along the bottom. Martha, Agnes, Catherine, Rose, Eleanor, and others who made beauty daily. Lily studied the mural with intense focus. "Mama, why did they stop making ribbons here?" The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Why did any manufacturing stop? Why did communities built on making things collapse when making moved elsewhere? Why did craftsmanship lose to efficiency, quality lose to cheapness, local production lose to global supply chains? "The world changed," Maya said carefully. Factories in other countries could make ribbons for less money. Companies chose cheaper over local. Eventually, there wasn't enough business to keep places like this running. That seems sad. It is sad, but maybe we can make it less sad. Maybe we can turn this place into something new that honors what it used to be. They descended back to the ground floor, Maya photographing structural details, noting areas that would need immediate attention versus eventual renovation. The building was salvageable. She'd stake her abandoned engineering degree on that assessment. But salvageable didn't mean affordable or easy or anything except technically possible. As they exited into sunlight, Maya saw they weren't alone anymore. 3 people stood near her car, 2 men and 1 woman, all appearing to be in their 60s or 70s, watching with expressions that mixed curiosity with something harder to read. The woman stepped forward first. "You're the one who bought this place." It wasn't a question. Maya nodded. "Yes, I'm Maya Chen. This is my daughter Lily. Catherine Morrison. I worked in this factory from 1975 until it closed in '89. Finishing department, 4th floor." She gestured to the building with obvious emotion. "Seeing someone here again after all these years. What are you planning to do with it?" "Renovate. Assess the structural integrity, repair what needs repairing, figure out how to use the space productively." One of the men snorted, his skepticism visible. "You know how many people have bought these buildings over the years? 7 that I can count. Every one of them had big plans. Condos, art studios, craft breweries, you name it. Every single one failed. Bank foreclosed, or they walked away, or they realized what we all know. These buildings are money pits. Beautiful money pits, but dead ends all the same." "Robert, don't be discouraging right off," Catherine chided. "Give the woman a chance. I'm being realistic. She's what, 30? With a kid? No offense, ma'am, But this project requires millions of dollars and years of work. You got that kind of backing? Maya met his gaze steadily. No, I have almost nothing. But I also have nothing to lose by trying, and everything to lose by not trying. So I'm going to try. The second man had been silent until now, studying Maya with sharp eyes that suggested he was evaluating more than her words. You're an engineer. Was an engineer. I didn't finish the degree, but I know structures, know materials, know enough to be dangerous. Thomas Brennan. I was the maintenance supervisor here for 20 years. Kept these buildings running when the owners stopped caring about maintenance budgets. He gestured to the west wing. That section's solid. Foundation's good. Walls are load-bearing brick. Roof joists are old-growth timber that'll outlast anything modern. The collapsed east wing is a loss. You'd spend more stabilizing it than it's worth. But the west wing, that's savable if you know what you're doing. That's my assessment, too. Though I'll need an official structural engineer to confirm for the county. Thomas nodded approvingly. Sarah McKinley over in Harrisburg does good work, reasonable prices. I can give you her number. She knows these old buildings, won't try to sell you repairs you don't need. Robert wasn't ready to let optimism take root. Even if the building's sound, what are you going to do with it? There's no ribbon market. There's barely any manufacturing in this whole region anymore. You can't compete with overseas production on any scale that matters. I don't plan to compete with overseas production. I plan to make things they can't make. Custom work, high-quality textiles, small-batch specialty items. My mother ran a textile import business for 40 years. She taught me that quality finds customers if you're patient and persistent. Your mother's business failed, Roberts said bluntly. Maya flinched but didn't retreat. Yes, it failed because she borrowed too much, trying to scale up, trying to compete in markets where size matters more than quality. I won't make that mistake. I'll start small, stay small, focus on what I can control. Catherine had been watching Lily, who drifted toward the building's wall, where decorative brickwork created patterns in the masonry. Your daughter has an eye for patterns. I can see her studying the brickwork, seeing how the colors create designs. She inherited her grandmother's love of textiles. She arranges fabric scraps like other kids arrange toys. There aren't many children in Millbrook anymore, Catherine said with obvious sadness. Young people leave. Only us old-timers remain, watching the town die one closed business at a time. A child here it's hopeful. Even if everything else fails, having a child exploring these buildings again, that matters. Thomas pulled out his phone and typed quickly. I'm texting you Sarah McKinley's contact info. Tell her Thomas Brennan referred you. She'll give you the local rate instead of the Pittsburgh rate. And ma'am, one more thing. The factory's locked sections. Maya's attention sharpened. Locked sections. The basement. When the factory closed in '89, the owners sealed the basement level, welded the doors shut, posted hazardous material warnings, told the county it was contaminated with dye chemicals and needed professional remediation before anyone could access it. County accepted that, slapped a condemned notice on those doors, and nobody's been down there in 36 years. You think it's actually contaminated? Thomas's expression suggested he had opinions he wasn't quite ready to share. I think it's sealed for reasons I don't understand. I worked here 20 years and never saw serious chemical contamination. We had proper disposal systems, EPA compliance, regular inspections. If there was contamination, it was news to me. Then why seal it? That's the question, isn't it? Why go to the expense of welding doors and filing contamination reports unless you wanted to make sure nobody went down there? Robert finally contributed something beyond skepticism. There were rumors. Nothing concrete, just talk. That the Hartley family stored more than ribbon equipment in those basements. That when the business was failing, they moved assets underground. But nobody knew what kind of assets, and after the factory closed, nobody cared enough to investigate. Assets like what? Equipment? Materials? Or records? Catherine said quietly. The Hartley family kept meticulous business records. Every sale, every contract, every transaction documented in ledgers that went back to the 1880s. When a factory closed, those records disappeared. The Historical Society tried to get them for our archives, but the family lawyer said everything had been destroyed. Some people thought that was suspicious. Maya processed this information, her engineering mind working through implications. Sealed basement. Contamination claims that didn't match the maintenance supervisor's experience. Missing historical records. Rumors of hidden assets. This was starting to feel less like a straightforward renovation and more like a mystery that had been waiting 36 years for someone curious enough to investigate. If I wanted to access the basement, what would be required? Thomas considered the question carefully. Legally, you need to hire a hazmat team to assess contamination, get EPA clearance, have the county inspect and approve access. That's probably $15,000 minimum, and there's no guarantee they'd actually find it safe to open. And illegally? The three older residents exchanged glances. Robert spoke first. We didn't hear that question. But hypothetically, if someone with engineering knowledge and proper safety equipment wanted to cut through a welded door, check air quality, and see what was actually down there before spending 15 grand on official processes, well, hypothetically, that someone would want to be careful, document everything, and maybe have witnesses who could testify that any contamination claims were exaggerated. Maya smiled despite herself. Hypothetically, Thomas agreed. And if that hypothetical person needed tools or advice, there's a hardware store on Main Street that sells angle grinders and respirators. The owner's my nephew. He'd know what someone might need for purely theoretical renovation work. Catherine pulled a business card from her purse. This is my number. Call me if you need anything, local knowledge, historical information, or just someone to watch your daughter while you're doing dangerous hypothetical work. Lily reminds me of my granddaughter who moved to Philadelphia. I miss having a child around. They departed after extracting promises that Maya would call, that she'd be careful, that she wouldn't let Robert's pessimism discourage her. Maya watched them walk down Industrial Avenue. Three people carrying memories of when this factory represented prosperity and community and the dignity of making things. Lily tugged Maya's sleeve. Mama, are we going to go into the basement? Eventually. But first, we need to make sure the building above it is safe. We do this carefully, one step at a time. What do you think is down there? Maya looked at the factory, at its Victorian grandeur and its sealed secrets. I don't know, baby, but I think we're going to find out. They spent the rest of the morning documenting the building's condition. Maya photographed every floor, every structural element, every sign of damage or decay. She measured dimensions, checked level accuracy, tested wood for rot, and concrete for structural integrity. Lily helped, holding the measuring tape's end, writing down numbers in a notebook they'd bought at the gas station. By noon, they were both exhausted, hungry, and covered in dust that had accumulated over decades. Maya drove them to the diner, figuring they couldn't avoid Millbrook's social center forever. The Millbrook Diner occupied a building that predated the factories, probably original to the town's founding in the 1840s. Inside smelled of coffee and fried food and time that had settled into every surface. The lunch crowd filled half the booths, mostly older residents, a few younger people who looked like they worked construction or service jobs that kept them local. Conversation dimmed when Maya and Lily entered. Not hostile, just curious. The new people, the strangers who'd bought the ribbon factory. Everyone wondering what kind of fool or visionary would take on that particular disaster. They slid into a booth near the window. A waitress approached immediately, probably in her 50s, wearing a name tag that read Denise and an expression that suggested she'd been working this shift since the factory was still open. You're the one who bought the Hartley building. Maya was getting used to this greeting. Yes, Maya Chen. This is Lily, Denise Patterson. My mother worked in that factory for 30 years. Weaving department. Best job she ever had. She always said. Cried the day it closed. Denise pulled out her order pad. What can I get you? They ordered burgers and fries. Food that would cost more than Maya wanted to spend, but less than she'd pay anywhere else. While they waited, Maya opened her laptop and began drafting the renovation plan she'd need to submit to the county within 30 days. A man slid into the booth across from them without invitation. Late 60s, weathered face, expensive watch that didn't match his flannel shirt and work boots. He smiled, but didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Chun, I'm Richard Pemberton. I own Pemberton Development. We handle most of the commercial real estate in this county. I heard you bought the old Hartley factory. News travels fast. Small town. People talk. I wanted to make you an offer before you get too attached to that property. Maya closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. What kind of offer? I'll buy it from you for $1,200. That's a $500 profit on your investment. Immediate return, no risk. You walk away clean. I take on the headache of the building. Why would you want it if it's such a headache? Pemberton's smile tightened. I collect properties. Sometimes you can aggregate enough buildings to make them attractive to developers who want to do large-scale projects. Your factory wouldn't be worth anything on its own, but combined with the other buildings I own on Industrial Avenue, it starts to have potential. What kind of development? That depends on market conditions. Could be demolished for salvage. Could be converted. Could be sold to someone with deeper pockets than either of us. Point is, you get your money back plus profit, and I handle the risk. Maya met his gaze steadily. I'm not selling. You haven't even considered the offer. I bought this property to renovate it, not to flip it. I'm staying. Pemberton's friendliness evaporated. You realize you're required to file a structural assessment within 30 days? That assessment will probably reveal significant safety hazards. The county will require you to either fix them or demolish. Demolition alone costs $50,000 minimum for a building that size. Can you afford that? I'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. Pemberton laughed without humor. Lady, I've watched 7 people try to save those buildings over 30 years. Every single one failed. You've got no money, no connections, no experience with projects this size. You're going to fail too, and when you do, the county will seize the property for back taxes. Then I'll buy it from them for even less than I offered you today. Lily had been silent until now, but his tone triggered her protective instincts. My mama doesn't fail. She's the smartest person in the world. Pemberton's expression softened slightly. Kid, I'm sure your mom is very smart. But smart doesn't pay for structural repairs. Smart doesn't keep the lights on when you've got no income and a building that needs hundreds of thousands of dollars in work. Maya stood, anger overriding caution. This conversation is over. We're not selling. Your funeral. But when you're ready to be realistic, here's my card. He dropped it on the table and left without looking back. Denise arrived with their food, having clearly overheard the exchange. Richard Pemberton's a snake. He's bought up half the factory buildings in this district, paying pennies to desperate owners, then sitting on them waiting for some magical development opportunity that never comes. He just wants to control everything so nobody else can succeed. Why does he care if I succeed? One person renovating one building shouldn't threaten him. Because if you succeed, you prove it's possible. You prove these buildings can be saved. That undermines his narrative that they're worthless. He needs them to be worthless so he can keep buying them cheap and sitting on them while the town dies. Maya sat back down, her appetite diminished but her determination reinforced. Then I guess I need to succeed just to spite him. Denise grinned. Now you're thinking like a Millbrook resident. We're stubborn people. We don't know when to quit. They ate lunch while Maya revised her renovation plan, adding details about phased approaches, minimal viable restoration, strategic priorities. She'd need to convince the county that she had a realistic path forward, that this wasn't just wishful thinking from someone who didn't understand the scope of the challenge. Her phone buzzed. Text from the number Thomas Brennan had provided. Sarah McKinley here. Tom says you need a structural assessment. I can come tomorrow 2 p.m. if that works. My rate for Millbrook properties is $600. Includes written reports suitable for county submission. Let me know. Sarah. Maya typed back immediately. Tomorrow 2 p.m. works. Thank you. We'll meet you at 847 Industrial Avenue. The response came within seconds. See you then. Tom says you're trying to save the Hartley factory. I wanted to get inside that building for years. Looking forward to it. One problem solved. The moving truck with her mother's equipment would arrive in 3 days. The assessment would be complete in 2. She'd have her report for the county with time to spare. Things were falling into place in ways that felt almost too convenient, as if the universe was testing her commitment by making the first steps easy before revealing how hard the rest would be. That afternoon, Maya drove to the hardware store Thomas had mentioned. The owner, who introduced himself as Pete Brennan and confirmed he was Thomas's nephew, helped her select tools without asking questions about their intended use. Angle grinder with metal cutting blades. Heavy-duty respirator rated for chemical exposure. Air quality monitor. Work gloves. Safety glasses. Flashlights rated for hazardous environments. You planning some theoretical renovation work? Pete asked with a knowing smile. Very theoretical. Purely hypothetical structural investigation. Well, hypothetically, if someone were cutting through old welded steel, they'd want to work in a well-ventilated area, wear proper respiratory protection, and check air quality before entering any sealed spaces. Hypothetically. That's very thorough hypothetical advice. Pete rang up the purchases, which totaled $340. More money Maya didn't have, charged to a credit card she was supposed to be paying down. But tools were investments. They enabled work that created value. That's what she told herself while signing the receipt and trying not to calculate how long it would take to pay this off at interest rates designed to keep poor people poor. Back at the factory, with Lily safely beside her, Maya examined the basement access points. She found 3, one in the west wing's north corner, one in the center of the ground floor, and one in what remained of the east wing's collapsed section, inaccessible without removing tons of rubble. The west wing door was exactly as Thomas had described. Steel, welded shut at the frame, with faded hazmat warnings stenciled in yellow and black. The welds looked professional but old, showing rust and degradation from 3 decades of moisture exposure. Maya knocked on the door, hearing the hollow echo of space beyond. Empty space, not filled storage. Whatever was down there had room to move around in. She pulled out her phone and called Thomas Brennan. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to access a sealed basement, which door would you recommend? West wing, north corner. It's the furthest from any structural concerns, best ventilation, and the door opens into what used to be the receiving area. Large space, multiple egress routes if anything goes wrong. Also, that section of basement has exterior windows that were boarded rather than bricked, so you could ventilate it easily. Good to know. Hypothetically, Ms. Chun, be careful. I don't know what's down there, but whatever it is, somebody thought it was important enough to seal thoroughly. That might mean valuable, but might also mean dangerous. I'll be careful. I promise. After disconnecting, Maya stared at the welded door, her engineering training warring with common sense. She should wait for official clearance, for professionals, for proper procedures. But official clearance cost money she didn't have, and every day waiting was another day without answers, without direction, without knowing if this building held salvation or just more disaster. Tomorrow the structural engineer would come. Tomorrow she'd get official assessment. But tonight, after Lily was asleep, Maya would return with her new tools and see what secrets the Hartley family had sealed beneath 36 years of rust and regulatory warnings. Sometimes the only way forward was through doors that were meant to stay closed. The motel room felt smaller at night, walls pressing in with the weight of decisions Maya wasn't sure she should make. Lily slept deeply, her breathing soft and rhythmic. One hand clutching the stuffed rabbit Victor had given her in what felt like another lifetime. Maya sat on the bathroom floor with the door closed, laptop balanced on her knees, researching basement safety protocols and trying to convince herself this wasn't completely reckless. The air quality monitor Pete had sold her sat on the sink counter, its instruction manual open beside it. Simple enough. Turn it on. Wait for calibration. Check readings for oxygen levels, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, and other hazardous gases. If the numbers stayed in safe ranges, the space was breathable. If not, she'd need professional remediation before attempting entry. Maya checked the time. 11:47 p.m. Late enough that Millbrook streets would be empty. Early enough that she'd be back before 2 a.m. if everything went smoothly. She'd change into work clothes, jeans, long-sleeve shirt, boots that had seen better days. She wrote a note for Lily in case the child woke. When to check the factory. Back soon. Stay in the room. Love you. Mom. The drive to Industrial Avenue took 4 minutes. No other cars on the road. No pedestrians. Millbrook after midnight was a ghost town in the most literal sense. Empty streets, dark windows, the sense that everyone had either left or given up trying to stay awake for a future that kept getting postponed. Maya parked behind a factory, out of sight from the street. She gathered her tools: angle grinder, respirator, air quality monitor, flashlight, crowbar for leverage. The equipment felt heavy, physical weight matching the psychological burden of what she was about to do. The West Wing's interior looked different at night. Her flashlight beam carved through darkness that felt thick, almost tangible, as if 3 decades of stillness had given the air substance. Dust motes swirled in the light, disturbed by her presence after years of perfect stagnation. The sealed basement door waited in the north corner, exactly as she'd left it. Maya pulled on her respirator and work gloves, then positioned the angle grinder against the first weld point. The metal-cutting blade screamed as it bit into old steel, throwing sparks that lit the surrounding darkness in brief, violent flashes. Cutting through 3 decades of welds was slow work. The steel had oxidized, creating layers of rust that the blade had to chew through before reaching the actual weld material. Maya worked methodically, cutting along the door frame's perimeter, stopping every few minutes to let the grinder cool and to listen for any sounds that might indicate she wasn't alone. After 90 minutes, the last weld separated with a metallic shriek that echoed through the empty factory. Maya set down the grinder and pulled on the door handle. The door resisted, seized by rust and time, but finally gave way with a grinding sound that set her teeth on edge. Behind the door, darkness opened like a mouth. Maya activated the air quality monitor and held it at arm's length into the opening. The device beeped, calibrating, then displayed readings that made her release a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Oxygen, 20.1%. Carbon monoxide, 0 ppm. VOCs, within safe range. Whatever was down there wasn't immediately toxic. She descended carefully, flashlight beam sweeping ahead of her. Stone steps, worn smooth by generations of workers, led down at a steep angle. The walls were brick, moisture-stained but solid. After 20 steps, the stairs ended at a landing, and beyond that, the basement opened into a space much larger than Maya had anticipated. The receiving area Thomas had mentioned was approximately 30 meters by 20, with a ceiling height of 3 meters, tall enough for loading and unloading materials, for storing inventory, for whatever industrial purposes basements served in Victorian-era factories. Support columns rose at regular intervals, cast iron matching the decorative style of the columns above. But the space wasn't empty. Against the far wall, wooden crates were stacked in neat rows, each marked with stenciled text that Maya's flashlight revealed as she approached. Hartley and Daughters. Private collection, 1885 to 1989. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Private collection, not industrial supplies, not chemical storage. This was something the Hartley family had deliberately preserved and hidden. She examined the nearest crate. The wood was solid, well-constructed, designed for long-term storage. The lid wasn't nailed. It was secured with metal clasps that opened easily despite decades of disuse. Inside, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper that crinkled under her touch, Maya found ribbons. But not ordinary ribbons. These were silk, hand-woven, with patterns so intricate they looked like paintings rendered in thread. Gold and silver threads caught her flashlight beam, creating shimmer that suggested these weren't just decorative items, but luxury goods. Each ribbon was labeled with a small tag, commissioned for Mrs. Astor. 1892, 10 yards, $240. $240 in 1892 would be worth thousands today. Maya carefully rewrapped the ribbon and moved to the next crate. More silk ribbons, each labeled with commission details, client names that sounded like American aristocracy, prices that made Maya's hands shake as she calculated their modern equivalents. The third crate held something different. Velvet ribbons in deep jewel tones, sapphire blue, emerald green, ruby red, but woven with gold thread and patterns that depicted entire scenes. Hunting parties, garden landscapes, naval battles. These weren't mass-produced factory goods. These are art pieces. Maya moved deeper into the basement, her flashlight revealing more crates, more shelves, more evidence of a collection that had been systematically preserved rather than sold or destroyed. She found ledgers next, leather-bound books stacked on metal shelving designed to protect them from moisture. She opened the topmost volume, dated 1885. The handwriting was meticulous, recording every commission, every sale, every transaction in ink that had barely faded. January 15th, 1885. Commission from Vanderbilt Estate. 50 yards crimson silk ribbon with gold medallion pattern. Payment received, $1,200. Completion date, March 1885. Page after page documented a luxury textile business that had served America's wealthiest families during the Gilded Age. The Hartley factory hadn't just manufactured ribbons. It had created bespoke decorative textiles for people who measured wealth in millions and taste in exclusivity. Maya found more ledgers, tracking the business through decades. The Depression had hurt, but not destroyed them. World War II had brought military contracts, parachute straps, uniform decorations, supply ribbons. The 1950s and 60s showed declining luxury orders, but steady mass production. The 1970s revealed increasing competition from overseas manufacturers. The 1980s showed the inevitable decline. Fewer orders, smaller contracts, desperation in the margins where someone had calculated and recalculated profit margins that kept shrinking. The final ledger ended in 1989 with a note written in different handwriting, shakier, probably from the last Hartley family member. Production ceased. Factory closed. Collection sealed in basement as family archive. To be preserved for historical documentation. Not to be sold or dispersed. Eleanor Hartley, March 1989. Eleanor Hartley had sealed this collection deliberately, preserving family history rather than liquidating assets. But why claim contamination? Why welded doors and hazmat warnings? Maya's flashlight found the answer in the basement's far corner. A door, modern and out of place among the Victorian brick, with a combination lock instead of the factory's original hardware. This had been added later, probably in the 1980s, to protect something beyond the textile collection. She tried the door handle. Locked, obviously. But the combination lock was mechanical, not electronic, and Maya had learned lockpicking from an engineering classmate who'd been passionate about physical security systems. She pulled out her multi-tool and worked the lock with patient precision, listening for the subtle clicks that indicated tumblers aligning. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, the lock opened. Behind the door, a smaller room, maybe 5 meters square, contained something that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. File cabinets. Not vintage, not industrial. Modern, fireproof, designed for document preservation. 8 cabinets total, each labeled with years. 1885 to 1910, 1911 to 1935, 1936 to 1960, 1961 to 1980, 1981 to 1989, and 3 labeled simply commissions, unfulfilled. Maya opened the first cabinet. Inside, organized in hanging folders, were contracts. Purchase orders from families whose names appeared in history books. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Mellon, Morgan, Astor, Vanderbilt. Each contract detailed custom textile orders, many unfulfilled due to the factory's closure, some with deposits paid that had never been refunded because the Hartley family's bankruptcy had frozen all assets. The contracts weren't just historical curiosities. They were legal documents, some with payment schedules that included interest accrual clauses, some with penalty provisions for non-delivery, some with arbitration requirements that had never been satisfied because the factory closed before completion. Maya pulled out her phone and photographed pages randomly, documenting what she was seeing even as her mind struggled to process implications. These contracts represented unfulfilled obligations, but they also represented potential claims. If the Hartley family's bankruptcy had never properly discharged these debts, if the contracts remained legally valid, then whoever owned the factory might have standing to pursue settlement or compensation from estates that had never received ordered goods. The second cabinet held something even more valuable: provenance documentation for the ribbon collection stored in the main basement. Each piece was cataloged with photographs, material specifications, historical context, and current estimated value as of 1989. Eleanor Hartley had commissioned professional appraisals before sealing the collection. Maya's hand shook as she read the appraisal summary. Total collection value: approximately $455 million based on current market rates for museum-quality Gilded Age textiles, historical significance, and rarity. Recommendation: preserve as intact collection for maximum value. Individual piece sales would realize significantly less due to loss of historical context. $455 million. The number refused to make sense. Maya read it again, checked the date, confirmed the appraiser's credentials. This wasn't a joke or exaggeration. This was a professional evaluation of a textile collection that documented American luxury manufacturing during its peak period. The collection had been worth $455 million in 1989. Modern values would be significantly higher with inflation, with increased interest in Gilded Age artifacts, with the rarity of complete factory archives. This basement contained more wealth than Maya had encountered in her entire life, sealed beneath a factory she'd bought for $700. She sat down on the concrete floor, flashlight beam pointing at nothing, trying to breathe normally despite the pressure building in her chest. This changed everything. This was salvation or catastrophe, depending on how she handled it, and she had no idea how to handle it. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. Text from an unknown number. Saw lights in the factory. Everything okay? Chief Davies. Maya's stomach dropped. The police chief was watching. Of course he was watching. Small town, abandoned building, new owner investigating in the middle of the night. She typed back. Everything's fine. Just doing some late-night structural assessment. Couldn't sleep. The response came immediately. Found anything interesting? Maya stared at the message, trying to decode its intent. Did he know about the collection? Was this friendly curiosity or subtle interrogation? She typed carefully. Lots of old factory equipment and records. Nothing exciting. Good. Be careful down there. Old buildings can be dangerous. She pocketed her phone and looked around the small room with its fireproof cabinets and its documentation of wealth that had been hidden for 36 years. Someone had known this collection existed. Eleanor Hartley had known, had documented it, had sealed it deliberately. But had she told anyone? Had she passed this knowledge to family members, to lawyers, to anyone who might have claims on property Maya now legally owned? The bankruptcy proceedings in 1989 should have inventoried all assets. If the collection had been disclosed, it would have been liquidated to pay creditors. The fact that it remained here suggested Eleanor Hartley had concealed it, had chosen family history preservation over debt satisfaction, had committed what was probably bankruptcy fraud to protect heritage she valued more than legal obligations. Which meant Maya now possessed assets that had been illegally hidden from bankruptcy court 36 years ago. Assets that might be subject to claims from creditors, from Hartley family descendants, from the bankruptcy trustee if anyone discovered they existed. Or assets that were legally hers if she'd purchased the property without knowledge of their existence. If no one came forward with superior claims, if she could establish clear title before anyone realized what she'd found. Maya's phone buzzed again. Different number this time. Text message. Ms. Chen, this is Richard Pemberton. My offer of $1,200 for the factory stands. Think about it. These old buildings have nothing but problems. RP. The timing felt suspicious. Pemberton texting at 1:30 a.m., just after Chief Davies had noticed activity at the factory. Were they coordinating? Did Pemberton know about the collection? Was this casual follow-up or calculated pressure? Maya didn't respond. She carefully photographed every page in the provenance cabinet, documenting the collection's existence and Eleanor Hartley's appraisal. She photographed the unfulfilled contracts, the purchase orders, the payment schedules. She created a digital record of everything before leaving, before telling anyone, before making decisions that would determine whether this discovery meant salvation or just more complicated disaster. She closed the cabinets, locked the combination door, and retraced her path to the main basement. The ribbon collection sat in its crates, silk and velvet and gold thread representing luxury that had outlasted the families who'd commissioned it. Maya touched one ribbon gently, feeling the quality that had made Hartley and daughters famous, understanding for the first time what her mother had meant about craftsmanship maturing beyond profit. These ribbons weren't just valuable. They were evidence that making beautiful things had worth beyond immediate economic return. They were testament to skill and care and the belief that quality justified premium prices. They were everything modern manufacturing had abandoned in favor of efficiency and scale. Maya climbed back up to the ground floor, pulled the basement door closed behind her, and examined the cut welds. She needed to make this look less like deliberate entry and more like structural failure. She used the crowbar to bend the door frame slightly, creating the appearance of stress damage rather than careful cutting. Not perfect, but enough to provide plausible deniability if anyone asked why the seal had failed. The drive back to the motel took 6 minutes through streets even emptier than before. Maya parked and sat in the car, trying to organize thoughts that kept fragmenting under the weight of what she discovered. She owned a factory worth maybe $50,000 in its current condition. But she also owned a textile collection worth potentially $500 million or more with inflation. She'd gambled $700 and accidentally acquired more wealth than she could conceptualize. Except she didn't really own it. Not yet. Not until she established legal title, disclosed the assets properly, navigated the bankruptcy implications, dealt with potential Hartley family claims, and somehow protected Lily from the chaos that would erupt when this became public knowledge. In motel room, Lily still slept soundly. Maya showered, washing away dust and metal shavings, trying to scrub off the feeling that she'd just stepped in a quicksand disguised as solid ground. She checked her bank balance, $47.23. In 12 hours, she'd gone from nearly broke to potentially wealthy beyond measure. But the money was theoretical, inaccessible, protected by legal complexity she couldn't navigate alone. She needed help. She needed lawyers, appraisers, historians, people who understood bankruptcy law and property rights, and how to handle unexpected asset discoveries. She needed resources she didn't have to protect, wealth she couldn't access. Or she needed to keep this secret until she figured out how to handle it properly, which meant lying to the structural engineer tomorrow, lying to the county, lying to everyone until she had a strategy that protected Lily from disaster. Maya set her phone alarm for 7 a.m. and lay down beside her daughter, listening to the child breathe, remembering her mother's letter. Don't give up on making things. The world will always need fabric, need textiles, need people who understand how threads become beauty. Her mother had left her knowledge and equipment. Eleanor Hartley had left a collection worth hundreds of millions. Between these two inheritances, Maya had everything she needed to build something extraordinary, if she could survive long enough to figure out how. The morning came too quickly, pulling Maya from dreams where she was drowning in silk ribbons that wrapped around her legs and pulled her under while Lily called for help from somewhere Maya couldn't reach. She woke to her daughter's face inches from her own, small hands shaking her shoulder with gentle persistence. "Mama, you're making scared sounds again." Maya blinked away the dream fragments and focused on Lily's concerned expression. "I'm okay, baby. Just weird dreams." "Were you dreaming about the factory?" "Yes, but it's okay. Just my brain processing everything." They went through morning routines, shower, breakfast from the gas station, watching cartoons on the motel TV, while Maya tried to organize the chaos in her head into something resembling a plan. The structural engineer was coming at 2 p.m. The moving truck with her mother's equipment would arrive tomorrow. She had decisions to make before either event happened. First decision: tell the structural engineer about the basement collection or keep it secret. Telling meant immediate complications, questions about why she'd opened a sealed, contaminated space, scrutiny she couldn't afford. Not telling meant lying by omission, risking legal problems if the truth came out later. Second decision: tell anyone else, Catherine, Thomas, Chief Davies, or keep this completely private. More people meant more risk of information spreading, but also meant more witnesses who could testify that she discovered the collection innocently, without prior knowledge of its existence. Third decision: contact Hartley family descendants immediately or wait until she'd established stronger legal position. Ethical approach required disclosure. Pragmatic approach required securing her claim first. Maya's phone rang, interrupting her spiral of impossible choices. Unknown Pennsylvania number. Ms. Chen, this is Barbara Hartley Morrison. I'm Eleanor Hartley's granddaughter. I heard you purchased the factory building, and I wanted to reach out. Maya's throat went dry. The Hartley family calling the morning after she discovered their sealed collection felt like cosmic timing or surveillance, and she wasn't sure which was worse. Hello. Yes, I bought the property at county auction last week. I'm calling because my grandmother left some items in the factory when it closed. Family archives, business records, nothing of monetary value, but important for historical preservation. I was hoping we could arrange access so I can retrieve them. The lie was delivered smoothly, practiced, as if Barbara had rehearsed this conversation. Nothing of monetary value. Either she didn't know about the collection's worth, or she was testing to see if Maya knew. I'm still assessing the building's safety. Once the structural engineer clears it, we could discuss access. I'd be happy to compensate you for your time. Say $2,000 for allowing me to retrieve family materials. $2,000. Generous payment for worthless archives, or calculated attempt to get inside the building and assess whether the collection remained. Maya's engineering training kicked in, analyzing this like a structural problem with known forces and unknown stresses. That's very generous, but I need to complete the assessment first. The county has specific requirements about building access during renovation planning. Barbara's tone shifted slightly, losing some of its friendly veneer. Ms. Chun, those archives are Hartley family property. They weren't included in the bankruptcy estate because they were personal items, not business assets. I have legal standing to retrieve them. Then you should have retrieved them before the building went to auction. The property was sold as is, including all contents. If you believe you have claims, you're welcome to contact my attorney. Maya didn't have an attorney, but Barbara didn't need to know that. Silence stretched long enough to feel hostile. Then Barbara's voice came back, colder. I see. Well, I hope you enjoy dealing with all the complications that property comes with. My grandmother sealed that basement for good reasons. You might want to leave it sealed. The call ended before Maya could respond. She stared at her phone, trying to decode the conversation's subtext. Barbara knew about the sealed basement. She knew about the collection, or at least suspected it existed. The comment about good reasons for sealing it sounded like threat wrapped in warning. Maya called Thomas Brennan immediately. This is Maya Chen. Barbara Hartley Morrison just called me asking about family archives in the basement. Thomas's response came sharp with alarm. What did you tell her? That I needed to complete structural assessment first. That building wasn't safe for access yet. She said Eleanor sealed the basement for good reasons and implied I should leave it sealed. Did she mention the textile collection specifically? No, just called it family archives without monetary value. But she offered me $2,000 to let her retrieve them, which seems excessive for worthless papers. That's because they're not worthless. Ms. Chun, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned yesterday. Eleanor Hartley told me about the collection in 1988, made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd make sure it went to someone who'd preserve it rather than liquidate it. She died in 2019, but her granddaughter Barbara has been trying to get access to that building ever since. Why didn't Barbara just buy at auction? Because she didn't want to pay the back taxes or take on the renovation liability. She wanted the collection without the building's problems. When you bought it, you became the obstacle she's been working around for 6 years. Maya's mind raced through implications. Does she know I opened the basement? Did you open the basement? Thomas's question carried no judgment, just curiosity. Hypothetically, Barbara might suspect, but can't prove anything unless you tell her. The question is what you plan to do with what you hypothetically found. I have no idea. Thomas, if that collection is worth what the 1989 appraisal claimed. $455 million. I know. Eleanor showed me the documentation. She sealed it to protect it from the bankruptcy trustee, made sure it never appeared in asset schedules, committed fraud to preserve family heritage. But she also knew that collection represented American textile history, that dispersing it would destroy its value. She wanted it preserved intact. And Barbara wants to sell it. Barbara wants the money. She's got no attachment to textile history or family legacy. She's been waiting for someone to buy that building so she could claim the collection as personal property excluded from the sale. The fact that you legally own the building and its contents complicates her plans considerably. Maya walked to the motel window, watching Millbrook wake up around her. What should I do? Hypothetically, document everything. Get legal counsel. Establish that you purchased the property without knowledge of the collection's existence, that you discovered it during legitimate renovation assessment, that you have clear title as the lawful property owner. Then contact the bankruptcy trustee and disclose the assets properly. That sounds like it will take months and cost money I don't have. It will, but it's also the only way to establish legitimate ownership. Otherwise, Barbara will sue claiming the collection was personal property excluded from the bankruptcy estate, and you'll spend years in litigation you can't afford. What if I just sealed the basement again and pretended I never found anything? Thomas's laugh held no humor. Barbara knows you've been in the building. Chief Davies told her about the lights last night. She's probably already filing paperwork to claim the collection. You can't put this back in the box, Ms. Chen. You opened it. Now you have to deal with the consequences. After hanging up, Maya made 3 decisions. First, she'd tell the structural engineer about the basement, but describe it as sealed storage with old business records. Not a lie, just incomplete truth. Second, she'd contact a lawyer immediately, using the $2,000 Barbara had offered as a mental budget for legal consultation. Third, she'd document everything meticulously, creating a paper trail that established innocent discovery and legitimate ownership. But first, she needed to get through the structural assessment without revealing more than necessary. Sarah McKinley arrived at exactly 2 p.m., driving a truck with McKinley Structural Engineering stenciled on the door. She was younger than Maya expected, maybe 40, with work boots and a professional confidence that suggested she'd climbed through enough old buildings to know what mattered. Miss Chun? I'm Sarah. Tom Brennan speaks highly of you. They shook hands, and Maya led her inside, starting at the ground floor and working up. Sarah examined everything with thorough attention. Foundation, walls, floor joists, roof structure, support columns, windows, mechanical systems. She took measurements, photographs, notes, asking questions that demonstrated genuine expertise. The building's solid, Sarah said after 2 hours of investigation. Victorian construction was overbuilt by modern standards. You've got double brick walls, old-growth timber joists, cast iron supports that'll outlast anything contemporary. The collapsed east wing is unsalvageable, but the west wing just needs cosmetic work and updated systems. I'll have your report ready in 2 days. What about the basement? Sarah's expression shifted slightly. Tom mentioned it was sealed. Contamination concerns? That's what the previous owners claimed. But I opened one door last night to check air quality. No contamination detected. You went down there? Sarah's eyebrows rose. That's either brave or reckless. Probably both. But I found something you should see. Maya led her to the basement, watching Sarah's reaction as they descended into the space that had been sealed for 36 years. The structural engineer's face cycled through surprise, confusion, and finally something like awe as her flashlight beam revealed the crated textile collection. What is this? According to the records I found, it's the Hartley family's private ribbon collection. Silk and velvet pieces commissioned by wealthy families during the Gilded Age, apparently worth hundreds of millions. Sarah walked among the crates, examining them with professional interest. These are museum-quality storage containers. Someone preserved this collection deliberately, and you had no idea it was here when you bought the building. I paid $700 for a collapsed factory. Nobody mentioned a textile museum in the basement. Jesus, this changes everything. You realize this building isn't just a renovation project. It's a historic preservation site. That collection needs climate control, security, professional curation. You can't just leave it sitting in crates. I know, but first I need to establish legal ownership, and that requires lawyers I can't afford. Sarah pulled out her phone and typed quickly. I'm texting you a name. Angela Reeves. She's a property attorney in Harrisburg who specializes in complicated title issues. Tell her I sent you. She'll give you an honest assessment of your situation. How much does honest assessment cost? For a case this interesting? Probably nothing until she decides whether to take it on contingency. Angela loves complicated legal puzzles, and this qualifies. They finished the basement inspection with Sarah documenting everything for her report. As they climbed back to ground level, she turned to Maya with serious expression. Ms. Chen, you stumbled into something significant. That collection represents American manufacturing history, cultural heritage, economic documentation from a period most people only know from books. But it also represents a legal nightmare involving bankruptcy fraud, estate disputes, and property claims. You need professional help, and you need it immediately. I know. I'm calling the lawyer today. Good. Because Barbara Hartley Morrison is probably already filing claims, and she's got resources you don't. She'll argue that the collection was personal property excluded from the bankruptcy estate, that it belongs to Hartley family descendants, that you have no legitimate claim. You'll need evidence that the collection was part of the factory's assets, that it was deliberately hidden from bankruptcy court, that your purchase included all contents. How do I prove that? With the documentation Eleanor Hartley left in those filing cabinets. The appraisal, the cataloging, the notes about preservation, all of that establishes that she treated the collection as factory assets, not personal effects. The fact that she sealed it in the factory basement rather than removing it to private storage supports your claim that it was part of the property. Mental budget for legal consultation. Third, she'd document everything meticulously, creating a paper trail that established innocent discovery and legitimate ownership. But first, she needed to get through the structural assessment without revealing more than necessary. Sarah McKinley arrived at exactly 2 p.m., driving a truck with McKinley Structural Engineering stenciled on the door. She was younger than Maya expected, maybe 40, with work boots and a professional confidence that suggested she'd climbed through enough old buildings to know what mattered. Miss Chun? I'm Sarah. Tom Brennan speaks highly of you. They shook hands, and Maya led her inside, starting at the ground floor and working up. Sarah examined everything with thorough attention. Foundation, walls, floor joists, roof structure, support columns, windows, mechanical systems. She took measurements, photographs, notes, asking questions that demonstrated genuine expertise. The building's solid, Sarah said after 2 hours of investigation. Victorian construction was overbuilt by modern standards. You've got double brick walls, old-growth timber joists, cast iron supports that'll outlast anything contemporary. The collapsed east wing is unsalvageable, but the west wing just needs cosmetic work and updated systems. I'll have your report ready in 2 days. What about the basement? Sarah's expression shifted slightly. Tom mentioned it was sealed. Contamination concerns? That's what the previous owners claimed. But I opened one door last night to check air quality. No contamination detected. You went down there? Sarah's eyebrows rose. That's either brave or reckless. Probably both. But I found something you should see. Maya led her to the basement, watching Sarah's reaction as they descended into the space that had been sealed for 36 years. The structural engineer's face cycled through surprise, confusion, and finally something like awe as her flashlight beam revealed the crated textile collection. What is this? According to the records I found, it's the Hartley family's private ribbon collection. Silk and velvet pieces commissioned by wealthy families during the Gilded Age, apparently worth hundreds of millions. Sarah walked among the crates, examining them with professional interest. These are museum-quality storage containers. Someone preserved this collection deliberately, and you had no idea it was here when you bought the building. I paid $700 for a collapsed factory. Nobody mentioned a textile museum in the basement. Jesus, This changes everything. You realize this building isn't just a renovation project. It's a historic preservation site. That collection needs climate control, security, professional curation. You can't just leave it sitting in crates. I know, but first I need to establish legal ownership, and that requires lawyers I can't afford. Sarah pulled out her phone and typed quickly. I'm texting you a name. Angela Reeves. She's a property attorney in Harrisburg who specializes in complicated title issues. Tell her I sent you. She'll give you an honest assessment of your situation. How much does honest assessment cost? For a case this interesting? Probably nothing until she decides whether to take it on contingency. Angela loves complicated legal puzzles, and this qualifies. They finished the basement inspection with Sarah documenting everything for her report. As they climbed back to ground level, she turned to Maya with serious expression. Ms. Chen, you stumbled into something significant. That collection represents American manufacturing history, cultural heritage, economic documentation from a period most people only know from books. But it also represents a legal nightmare involving bankruptcy fraud, estate disputes, and property claims. You need professional help, and you need it immediately. I know. I'm calling the lawyer today. Good. Because Barbara Hartley Morrison is probably already filing claims, and she's got resources you don't. She'll argue that the collection was personal property excluded from the bankruptcy estate, that it belongs to Hartley family descendants, that you have no legitimate claim. You'll need evidence that the collection was part of the factory's assets, that it was deliberately hidden from bankruptcy court, that your purchase included all contents. How do I prove that? With the documentation Eleanor Hartley left in those filing cabinets. The appraisal, the cataloging, the notes about preservation, all of that establishes that she treated the collection as factory assets, not personal effects. The fact that she sealed it in the factory basement rather than removing it to private storage supports your claim that it was part of the... And you hope that somewhere, in the tangle of law and justice and competing claims, truth mattered more than money. Maya opened her laptop and began writing. Documentation of every decision, every discovery, every interaction, creating a paper trail that would establish her innocence and her rights. Building a case from nothing but determination and belief that quality, of work, of character, of purpose, had to count for something in a world that seemed designed to crush people like her. Outside, Millbrook settled into another night, a town full of people who'd watched their industries die and their children leave. But inside this small room, Maya Chen refused to accept that decline was destiny. She bought a factory for $700, discovered a fortune, and stumbled into a fight she couldn't afford to lose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she'd survived another day, and that was enough. The drive to Harrisburg took 90 minutes through Pennsylvania countryside that looked like autumn had forgotten to finish its work. Trees held on to brown leaves with stubborn determination. Fields lay fallow under gray skies, and the highway stretched ahead with the kind of monotony that left Maya too much time to think about everything that could go wrong. Lily sat in the passenger seat, coloring in a notebook Catherine had given her, occasionally asking questions about where they were going and why lawyers cost money if they were supposed to help people. Maya answered as honestly as she could, without transferring her own anxiety to a 6-year-old who deserved better than adult worries disguised as adventure. Angela Reeves's office occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated industrial building that had probably once manufactured something Pennsylvania was famous for: steel, textiles, machinery, before economic transformation had converted production spaces into professional offices. The irony wasn't lost on Maya as she rode the elevator up with Lily holding her hand and a folder full of documentation tucked under her arm. The reception area smelled like coffee and expensive furniture polish. A woman in her 50s looked up from behind a desk that probably cost more than Maya's car, smiled warmly at Lily, and gestured toward an inner office where Angela Reeves stood waiting. Angela was younger than her credentials suggested, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail and glasses that gave her the appearance of someone who spent more time reading case law than worrying about fashion. She shook Maya's hand with firm grip, knelt to Lily's eye level, and introduced herself properly. then gestured to chairs arranged around a conference table covered with legal pads and reference books. Miss Chen, I've done preliminary research since receiving your email. Your situation is fascinating from a property law perspective and potentially catastrophic from a personal liability standpoint. Let's start with the basics. Walk me through exactly what happened, from purchasing the property to discovering the collection. Maya recounted everything. The auction listing, the $700 purchase, the eviction notice that had forced her hand, the move across country with her daughter and her mother's equipment, the sealed basement and Thomas Brennan's information, her decision to open it, the discovery of the textile collection, and Eleanor Hartley's documentation. Angela took notes rapidly, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated she was processing information at speeds Maya envied. When Maya finished, the attorney leaned back and steepled her fingers in a gesture that probably meant she was calculating odds Maya didn't want to know. All right, here's your legal position. You purchased the property at a legitimate county auction following proper procedures. The sale was as is, including all contents. The county had no record of the sealed collection because Eleanor Hartley deliberately concealed it from the 1989 bankruptcy estate. That concealment constitutes bankruptcy fraud, but Eleanor is deceased and therefore can't be prosecuted. The question becomes whether her fraud affects your ownership claim. Does it? Probably not. You're a bona fide purchaser without notice of the hidden assets. You paid fair market value for what appeared to be a damaged factory building. The fact that the building contained undisclosed assets doesn't invalidate your purchase. It just complicates establishing clear title. What about Barbara Hartley Morrison's claim? Angela's expression hardened. I reviewed the filing she submitted yesterday. She's arguing that the textile collection was personal property belonging to Eleanor Hartley, excluded from the bankruptcy estate under personal effects exemptions, and therefore not included in your property purchase. She's claiming the collection should pass to Hartley family heirs under Eleanor's will. Can she win that argument? Not if we present the documentation you found. Eleanor's own records establish that the collection was factory inventory, not personal effects. She cataloged it as business assets, obtained professional appraisals for insurance purposes, and stored it in factory-owned space, rather than removing it to personal storage. The fact that she concealed it from bankruptcy court doesn't transform business assets into personal property. Lily had been coloring quietly, but now looked up. Mama, does this mean we get to keep the ribbons? Angela smiled at her. That's what we're going to make sure happens, sweetheart. Your mom found something valuable, and we're going to prove it belongs to her legally. The ribbons are really pretty. Mrs. Catherine showed me pictures of ribbons like that in books about old-fashioned dresses. They are beautiful, and they tell important stories about how people used to make things with care and skill. Your mom is going to preserve them so other people can learn those stories. Maya felt a surge of gratitude for Angela's instinct to include Lily, to make this comprehensible to a child who was living through upheaval she couldn't fully understand. What do we do next? Several things simultaneously. First, I'm filing a response to Barbara's claim establishing your superior ownership rights. Second, I'm contacting the original bankruptcy trustee to disclose the discovered assets and confirm that Eleanor's fraud doesn't affect your purchase validity. Third, I'm arranging for an updated professional appraisal of the collection to establish current value. Fourth, I'm securing the collection with proper insurance and security measures. You can't leave $500 million worth of textiles sitting in an unsealed basement. I can't afford insurance for $500 million. You won't need to pay initially. I have contacts with specialty insurers who'll cover valuable property discoveries during title dispute resolution. The premiums get paid from the collection's eventual sale or exhibition proceeds. What if we don't win? What if Barbara's claim succeeds? Angela met Maya's eyes with directness that was either reassuring or terrifying. Then you'll have spent months fighting for something you lose, and Barbara will have a $500 million collection she'll probably sell piecemeal to the highest bidders, destroying its historical value and Eleanor's preservation efforts. But I don't plan to let that happen. What's your fee structure for this case? Contingency. I take 33% of whatever value you realize from the collection, whether through sale, museum placement, or other arrangements. If you lose, you pay nothing beyond out-of-pocket expenses for appraisals and expert witnesses. Maya calculated quickly. 33% of $500 million was approximately $165 million. Angela would become extraordinarily wealthy if they won. But Maya would still have $335 million, which was $335 million more than she'd had before opening that basement door. And if I can't afford the out-of-pocket expenses, we'll work it out. I have discretionary funds for cases with significant public interest components. This qualifies. The question isn't whether I'll represent you. I'm already committed. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next. Because Barbara will fight viciously, and this will get ugly before it gets resolved. How ugly? She'll attack your character, your finances, your fitness as a parent. She'll argue you're an unstable, single mother who bought a condemned building on impulse, who broke into a sealed, contaminated space recklessly, who's trying to steal family heritage that doesn't belong to you. She'll paint herself as a responsible family member trying to preserve her grandmother's legacy from an opportunistic outsider. Lily's coloring had stopped. She was listening with the careful attention children develop when adult conversations turn serious. Maya reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. Can you defend against those attacks? Absolutely. You're a veteran with engineering training who made a calculated investment in property that happened to contain undisclosed assets. You opened the basement as part of legitimate structural assessment, discovered a collection that had been fraudulently concealed, and immediately sought legal counsel to establish proper ownership. You're trying to preserve the collection according to Eleanor's documented wishes, while Barbara just wants to liquidate it for maximum profit. The narrative is on our side if we present it correctly. When's the court hearing? 9 days. That's aggressive timing. Barbara's lawyer is pushing for quick resolution, probably hoping to catch you unprepared. But it works in our favor because we have documentation she doesn't know we have. Eleanor's records, the appraisal, the cataloging system, all of that establishes that the collection was business property, not personal effects. Angela stood and moved to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. I've prepared preliminary briefs for you to review. I'll need you to sign representation agreements, provide complete financial disclosure, and sit for a deposition where Barbara's lawyer will ask hostile questions designed to undermine your credibility. Can you handle that? I've handled worse. I believe you. But Ms. Chen, there's one more thing you should know. I did some research on Barbara Hartley Morrison. Her father was Gregory Morrison, a corporate attorney who specialized in helping wealthy clients protect assets from creditors, taxes, and legal judgments. He died 5 years ago, but Barbara learned from him. She's not just defending family legacy. She's executing a strategy her father probably designed before Eleanor died. What kind of strategy? Concealing valuable assets from bankruptcy estates, then retrieving them years later when bankruptcy proceedings are closed and creditors have given up. It's technically fraud, but proving it requires evidence that usually doesn't exist. Eleanor sealed that collection in 1989 and died in 2019. Barbara's been waiting 6 years for someone to buy the building, so she could claim the collection as personal property excluded from a sale. You're disrupting a plan that's been in motion for 36 years. Maya felt cold understanding settle over her. She knew about the collection the whole time. That's why she offered me $2,000 for family archives. She was trying to get access before I discovered what was really there. Exactly. And when you refused, she filed her claim immediately to establish legal action before you could secure your position. She's playing a sophisticated game, but she made one mistake. What mistake? She assumed you were unsophisticated enough to not document everything, not seek legal counsel immediately, not understand property law sufficiently to defend your claim. She underestimated you, and that's going to cost her everything. The next week passed in a blur of activity that made Maya's previous definition of busy seem quaint. The moving truck arrived with her mother's equipment, 20 industrial sewing machines and associated supplies, now sitting in the factory's ground floor awaiting installation. Sarah McKinley's structural report arrived, confirming the West Wing was sound and providing detailed renovation specifications the county accepted. Angela arranged for museum-quality appraisers from the Smithsonian's Textile Division to examine the collection. 3 experts spent 2 days in the basement, carefully unwrapping ribbons, checking condition, comparing pieces to historical records, photographing everything with equipment that cost more than Maya's car. Their preliminary assessment, delivered in a conference call that made Maya's hands shake, established current collection value at $547 million. Adjusted for inflation, market demand for Gilded Age artifacts, and the premium commanded by complete factory archives rather than individual pieces. $547 million. The number kept not making sense no matter how many times Maya heard it. She'd spent $700 and accidentally acquired wealth that exceeded most lottery jackpots. But Barbara wasn't conceding. Her lawyer filed motion after motion to seal the collection pending ownership determination, to prevent Maya from accessing the basement, to establish Barbara as temporary conservator of family heritage assets, to require Maya to post bond covering the collection's full value. Angela fought each motion with briefs that cited property law, bankruptcy precedent, and bona fide purchaser doctrine with encyclopedic precision. The town of Millbrook transformed around Maya during this week. News spread faster than wildfire. The newcomer who'd bought the Hartley factory for $700 had discovered a treasure worth $500 million. Some residents celebrated, seeing it as validation that Millbrook still had value, still mattered, still held secrets worth discovering. Others resented her, an outsider getting lucky while locals struggled. Richard Pemberton appeared at the factory 3 times, each visit featuring escalating offers. $5,000, $50,000, $500,000 for Maya to avoid legal complications by selling to someone with established local credibility. Angela instructed Maya to refuse all contact, to document his harassment, to let her handle any communication. Chief Davies stopped by once, ostensibly to check on safety compliance, but really to express something between concern and curiosity. "Ms. Chen, the whole town's talking about what you found. Barbara Hartley Morrison has been calling me daily, suggesting you're trespassing, vandalizing, stealing family property. I told her you're the legal property owner conducting legitimate renovation. But watch yourself. She's got connections, money, and 36 years of planning behind her claim." Catherine Morrison became an unexpected ally, offering to watch Lily during depositions and legal meetings, teaching the child weaving basics on a small hand loom she'd kept from her factory days. Lily absorbed the instruction with hungry focus, her grandmother's talent expressing itself through hands that understood thread and pattern instinctively. Thomas Brennan provided detailed testimony about Eleanor Hartley's instructions to preserve the collection, about the factory's operations, about the business nature of the ribbon inventory. His credibility as a 20-year employee with no financial stake in the outcome proved valuable for Angela's case preparation. And through it all, Maya worked. She cleaned the factory's ground floor, planned equipment installation, drafted business proposals for custom textile production, research markets for. I believe you. But Ms. Chun, there's one more thing you should know. I did some research on Barbara Hartley Morrison. Her father was Gregory Morrison, a corporate attorney who specialized in helping wealthy clients protect assets from creditors, taxes, and legal judgments. He died 5 years ago, but Barbara learned from him. She's not just defending family legacy. She's executing a strategy her father probably designed before Eleanor died. What kind of strategy? Concealing valuable assets from bankruptcy estates, then retrieving them years later when bankruptcy proceedings are closed and creditors have given up. It's technically fraud, but proving it requires evidence that usually doesn't exist. Eleanor sealed that collection in 1989 and died in 2019. Barbara's been waiting 6 years for someone to buy the building, so she could claim the collection as personal property excluded from a sale. You're disrupting a plan that's been in motion for 36 years. Maya felt cold understanding settle over her. She knew about the collection the whole time. That's why she offered me $2,000 for family archives. She was trying to get access before I discovered what was really there. Exactly. And when you refused, she filed her claim immediately to establish legal action before you could secure your position. She's playing a sophisticated game, but she made one mistake. What mistake? She assumed you were unsophisticated enough to not document everything, not seek legal counsel immediately, not understand property law sufficiently to defend your claim. She underestimated you, and that's going to cost her everything. The next week passed in a blur of activity that made Maya's previous definition of busy seem quaint. The moving truck arrived with her mother's equipment, 20 industrial sewing machines and associated supplies, now sitting in the factory's ground floor awaiting installation. Sarah McKinley's structural report arrived, confirming the West Wing was sound and providing detailed renovation specifications the county accepted. Angela arranged for museum-quality appraisers from the Smithsonian's Textile Division to examine the collection. 3 experts spent 2 days in the basement, carefully unwrapping ribbons, checking condition, comparing pieces to historical records, photographing everything with equipment that cost more than Maya's car. Their preliminary assessment, delivered in a conference call that made Maya's hands shake, established current collection value at $547 million. Adjusted for inflation, market demand for Gilded Age artifacts, and the premium commanded by complete factory archives rather than individual pieces. $547 million. The number kept not making sense no matter how many times Maya heard it. She'd spent $700 and accidentally acquired wealth that exceeded most lottery jackpots. But Barbara wasn't conceding. Her lawyer filed motion after motion to seal the collection pending ownership determination, to prevent Maya from accessing the basement, to establish Barbara as temporary conservator of family heritage assets, to require Maya to post bond covering the collection's full value. Angela fought each motion with briefs that cited property law, bankruptcy precedent, and bona fide purchaser doctrine with encyclopedic precision. The town of Millbrook transformed around Maya during this week. News spread faster than wildfire. The newcomer who'd bought the Hartley factory for $700 had discovered a treasure worth $500 million. Some residents celebrated, seeing it as validation that Millbrook still had value, still mattered, still held secrets worth discovering. Others resented her, an outsider getting lucky while locals struggled. Richard Pemberton appeared at the factory 3 times, each visit featuring escalating offers. $5,000, $50,000, $500,000 for Maya to avoid legal complications by selling to someone with established local credibility. Angela instructed Maya to refuse all contact, to document his harassment, to let her handle any communication. Chief Davies stopped by once, ostensibly to check on safety compliance, but really to express something between concern and curiosity. "Ms. Chun, the whole town's talking about what you found. Barbara Hartley Morrison has been calling me daily, suggesting you're trespassing, vandalizing, stealing family property. I told her you're the legal property owner conducting legitimate renovation. But watch yourself. She's got connections, money, and 36 years of planning behind her claim." Catherine Morrison became an unexpected ally, offering to watch Lily during depositions and legal meetings, teaching the child weaving basics on a small hand loom she'd kept from her factory days. Lily absorbed the instruction with hungry focus, her grandmother's talent expressing itself through hands that understood thread and pattern instinctively. Thomas Brennan provided detailed testimony about Eleanor Hartley's instructions to preserve the collection, about the factory's operations, about the business nature of the ribbon inventory. His credibility as a 20-year employee with no financial stake in the outcome proved valuable for Angela's case preparation. And through it all, Maya worked. She cleaned the factory's ground floor, planned equipment installation, drafted business proposals for custom textile production, researched markets for. As factory assets? Why did she store it in factory-owned basement space rather than removing it to personal storage? Hastings fumbled slightly. The insurance and appraisals were for record-keeping purposes. Eleanor was thorough in documenting everything. I see. And the fact that Eleanor's own notes, written in 1989, explicitly state collection sealed in factory basement as business archive for historical preservation. That doesn't indicate business assets rather than personal effects. Those notes reflect Eleanor's personal desire to preserve family history. They don't transform personal property into business assets. Angela introduced Eleanor's documentation, then the appraisal establishing collection value, the cataloging system treating each piece as inventory, the notes about preservation for historical rather than familial purposes. Each document undermined Barbara's claim that this was personal property excluded from the bankruptcy estate. Then Angela called Thomas Brennan to testify. He took the stand with visible nervousness, but his testimony carried the weight of direct knowledge. Mr. Brennan, you worked as maintenance supervisor at the Hartley factory for 20 years. Did you have conversations with Eleanor Hartley about the textile collection? Yes, ma'am. Eleanor told me in 1988 that she was sealing the collection in the basement because she couldn't let it be sold off to pay creditors. She said it represented the factory's history, its legacy, and needed to be preserved intact for whoever eventually cared enough to restore the building. Did she specifically say whoever eventually cared enough to restore the building? Not for family members or for Hartley descendants. Whoever cared enough to restore the building. She said she'd rather trust a stranger who valued preservation over a family member who just wanted money. Barbara's expression tightened with visible anger. Hastings objected. Hearsay, unreliable memory, witness bias. But Judge Thornton allowed the testimony, noting that Eleanor's intent was directly relevant to establishing the collection's legal status. Angela then introduced the smoking gun. Eleanor's 1989 letter to Thomas, typed on factory letterhead, stored in the sealed filing cabinet. Thomas, I'm trusting you with this knowledge because I believe you understand what matters. The ribbon collection sealed in the basement represents 104 years of Hartley family craftsmanship. It includes pieces commissioned by Astors, Vanderbilts, Carnegies, America's wealthiest families during the Gilded Age. Professional appraisers value it at $455 million. I'm concealing this from the bankruptcy trustee because selling it piecemeal would destroy its historical value and betray everything the factory stood for. I'm aware this constitutes fraud. I don't care. Some obligations transcend legal requirements. If my family tries to claim this collection after I'm gone, tell them I said no. It belongs with the factory to whoever eventually restores it and honors what we built here. Not to descendants who never worked a day in this building and don't understand the difference between price and value. Eleanor Hartley, March 1989 inch. The letter hung in the courtroom's silence like a verdict delivered from beyond the grave. Barbara's face had gone pale. Hastings requested a recess, clearly needing time to regroup after this evisceration of his client's claim. Judge Thornton denied the request. I'm prepared to rule. This case presents clear facts. Ms. Chen purchased the property at legitimate auction, including all contents. The textile collection was business inventory, not personal effects, as established by Eleanor Hartley's own documentation. Eleanor deliberately concealed the collection from bankruptcy court, intending it to remain with the factory for whoever eventually restored it. Ms. Chen meets that criteria. Your Honor, Hastings interjected desperately. Eleanor Hartley was my client's grandmother. Surely family connection. Family connection doesn't override property law, Mr. Hastings. Eleanor made her intentions clear. She trusted the collection to future preservation, not family inheritance. Ms. Chen is the legal owner. Barbara stood abruptly. That collection is worth $500 million. You're giving it to some broke single mother who bought a condemned building on a whim. Judge Thornton's expression went ice cold. Ms. Hartley Morrison, control yourself. This broke single mother is the legal property owner who discovered assets your grandmother deliberately concealed. Your anger should be directed at Eleanor's choices, not at Ms. Chen's legitimate ownership claim. My grandmother wouldn't want this. She preserved that collection for family. Your grandmother's letter explicitly says otherwise. She preserved it for whoever eventually cared enough to restore the building. Ms. Chen is doing exactly that. Claim denied. Barbara's lawyer tried one final attack. Your Honor, Ms. Chen can't possibly afford to properly preserve a collection of this value. She has no resources, no expertise, no. Angela cut him off. Ms. Chen has already secured museum-quality insurance and professional conservation specialists. The Smithsonian has expressed interest in long-term loan arrangements that would provide both preservation and public access. Ms. Chen intends to honor Eleanor Hartley's wishes by keeping the collection intact and accessible for historical education. Judge Thornton nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of stewardship Eleanor intended. My ruling stands. Ms. Chen has clear legal title to the property and all its contents, including the textile collection. Ms. Hartley Morrison, if you wish to appeal, that's your right. But I'm confident this ruling will be upheld. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. Barbara stormed from the courtroom, her lawyer following with defeated posture. Maya sat motionless, trying to process what had just happened. She'd won. The collection was legally hers. $547 million worth of silk and velvet ribbons, preserved by Eleanor Hartley and entrusted to whoever cared enough to honor their history. Lily threw her arms around Maya's waist, squeezing with fierce pride. You won, Mama. We get to keep the ribbons. Angela gathered her documents with visible satisfaction. Congratulations, Ms. Chen. You're now the legal owner of one of America's most significant private textile collections. What you do with it is up to you. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Local news, regional papers, even a stringer from the New York Times who'd heard about the case and recognized its human interest potential. Angela handled most questions with professional deflection, but allowed Maya to make a brief statement. I bought a factory for $700 because I needed a home for my daughter and myself. I discovered a collection worth millions because Eleanor Hartley preserved it for someone who'd honor her family's legacy. I'm going to restore that factory, use my mother's equipment to produce textiles again, and make sure the collection remains intact for historical education. This isn't about getting rich. It's about preserving craftsmanship and proving that making beautiful things still matters. The quotes would appear in newspapers across Pennsylvania, then nationally, then internationally as the story gained traction. Single mother buys condemned factory for $700, discovers $547 million textile treasure, wins legal battle against wealthy family heir, plans to restore American manufacturing. But Maya barely registered the attention. She drove back to Millbrook with Lily chattering excitedly about everything they could do now, about painting her room yellow, about learning to weave like the women in the factory's mural, about helping Mama make beautiful ribbons like the ones in the basement. The transformation of the Hartley Ribbon Factory took 18 months. Not because Maya lacked resources. The collection's value gave her access to loans, investors' preservation grants, but because doing it properly required time, expertise, and unwillingness to compromise quality for speed. The West Wing was restored to Victorian grandeur while incorporating modern safety systems, climate control, and accessibility features. The original windows were replaced with historically accurate replicas. The terrazzo floors were cleaned and polished until they gleamed. The cast iron support columns were sandblasted and repainted in their original green. Maya's mother's industrial sewing machines were installed on the ground floor, arranged to optimize workflow for custom textile production. She hired 3 experienced seamstresses from surrounding towns, women who'd worked in now-closed factories and brought decades of expertise to an operation that valued skill over efficiency. The second floor became a working weaving studio where historical looms were restored to operational condition. Catherine Morrison served as chief weaving instructor, teaching Maya, Lily, and a rotating group of apprentices who travel from across the country to learn traditional techniques most textile programs no longer taught. The third floor housed the dyeing operation, updated with modern environmental controls, but using traditional natural dye processes. Thomas Brennan's nephew Pete managed it, having discovered unexpected talent for color formulation after years of selling paint at the hardware store. The fourth floor became a museum space where the Hartley collection was displayed in climate-controlled cases designed by Smithsonian consultants. Each piece was labeled with historical context, client information, and technical details about its construction. School groups visited weekly. Textile historians made pilgrimages. The museum became Millbrook's unexpected tourist attraction, bringing visitors who also patronized local businesses, creating economic ripple effects nobody had anticipated. The collapsed East Wing remained untouched, left as a monument to industrial decline and a reminder that preservation required constant effort. Vines grew over the rubble, and birds nested in the exposed brick, nature reclaiming what humans had abandoned. Hartley and Daughters resumed operations under Maya's ownership, producing custom ribbons for designers, costumers, crafters who valued American-made quality. The business would never achieve the scale of its Gilded Age peak, but it didn't need to. Small batch production commanded premium prices from customers who wanted textiles with stories attached. Lily thrived in this environment, growing from a 6-year-old displaced by poverty into an 8-year-old weaver whose work showed promise that made Catherine cry with pride. The child had inherited her great-great-grandmother's talent, her grandmother's business sense, and her mother's stubborn refusal to give up when things got difficult. Barbara Hartley Morrison filed appeals that were systematically rejected. She attempted to purchase collection pieces individually, offering millions for specific items. Angela declined all offers on Maya's behalf, explaining that the collection's value lay in its completeness. Barbara eventually gave up, moving to California and cutting ties with Millbrook entirely. Richard Pemberton's development company declared bankruptcy after it emerged that he'd been using property holdings as collateral for loans he couldn't repay. The factory buildings he'd accumulated were sold at auction, purchased by a nonprofit Maya helped establish, the Industrial Heritage Preservation Trust, dedicated to saving Pennsylvania's manufacturing history one building at a time. The trust renovated 3 additional factory buildings over 2 years, creating artisan workshops, affordable housing for working artists, and exhibition spaces showcasing regional manufacturing history. Millbrook's population stabilized, then began growing as young people discovered a town that valued craft over corporate chains. Maya never sold the textile collection. Instead, she structured a 99-year loan to the Smithsonian, providing public access while maintaining legal ownership. The arrangement generated annual fees that funded the factory's operations, paid employees fair wages, and supported the Preservation Trust expansion. She kept one ribbon for herself, a simple silk piece in blue and silver, woven in 1892, commissioned by a family whose name wasn't famous, who'd wanted something beautiful for their daughter's wedding dress. Maya framed it in her office, a reminder that luxury wasn't just for aristocrats, that ordinary people had always valued quality when they could afford it, that making beautiful things served purposes beyond profit. 2 years after buying the factory, Maya stood on the 4th floor beside the mural showing women at looms, watching Lily demonstrate weaving techniques to a school group visiting from Philadelphia. The child's hands moved with confident precision, explaining warp and weft, showing how patterns emerged from systematic thread manipulation, answering questions with patience that belied her age. Catherine stood beside Maya, her eyes bright with tears she didn't try to hide. Your mother would be so proud. And Eleanor. They both see themselves in that child. Do you think Eleanor knew? When she sealed the collection, when she wrote that letter to Thomas, did she somehow know that someone like me would find it? I think Eleanor believed in possibilities. She couldn't predict specifics, but she trusted that someone, eventually, would care enough. The fact that it was you, a single mother with textile heritage, with engineering knowledge, with a daughter talented enough to carry traditions forward, that's either cosmic coincidence or profound justice. Maybe both. Thomas Brennan approached, moving more slowly than he had 2 years ago, but still sharp-eyed and curious. Maya, there's someone here to see you. Says she's from the State Department. Maya's stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. Official visitors still made her nervous, still triggered memories of eviction notices and debt collectors. But Catherine touched her arm reassuringly. Go. You've done nothing wrong. You're the most legitimate business owner this town's seen in 40 years. The visitor waited in the ground floor reception area, a woman in her 40s, professionally dressed, but with warmth that suggested she wasn't here to deliver bad news. She extended her hand with a smile. "Ms. Chen, I'm Rachel Martinez from the State Department's Cultural Heritage Division. I wanted to discuss an unusual opportunity." They sat in Maya's office, a space she'd created from what had once been a factory supervisor's quarters. Photographs covered the walls. Her mother at her warehouse, Eleanor Hartley with factory workers, historical images of the weaving operation at its peak, and recent photos of Lily learning craft from Catherine. Rachel pulled out a folder. The Chinese government has been requesting cultural exchange programs focused on textile heritage. They're particularly interested in American manufacturing. History during the Gilded Age, when Chinese silk was imported and transformed by American artisans. Your factory and collection represent exactly the kind of program they're seeking. What kind of program? Exhibition loan. 20 pieces from your collection displayed in Beijing and Shanghai, with accompanying educational materials about American textile history, immigration, craft traditions. In exchange, Chinese museums would loan comparative pieces to your museum here. Silk examples from the same period, showing how materials traveled and techniques evolved across cultures. Maya's throat tightened. "My mother's family came from Guangzhou. She grew up surrounded by silk weaving before immigrating to California. This feels full circle." "It is. And Ms. Chun, there's more. The program includes funding for cultural exchange visits. Chinese textile artisans would come here to learn from you and your team. You'd travel to China to study their preservation methods and historical collections. Your daughter would be eligible for a youth cultural ambassador program. Lily would go to China with you as part of a family exchange, highlighting how craft traditions pass between generations and across borders. She's young, but her weaving skills are already remarkable. Chinese artisans would love to meet her, to teach her techniques your mother's grandmother might have known." Maya walked to the window overlooking Industrial Avenue, the street that had looked so desolate when she'd first arrived. Now it showed signs of life. The hardware store busy with contractors, the diner full during lunch hours, new businesses opening in renovated spaces. Her factory stood at the center of this renewal, proving that preservation could spark transformation. When would this happen? Next summer, if you're interested. 6 weeks in China, then hosting Chinese artisans here for 6 weeks. Full expenses covered, plus compensation for your time and expertise. Maya thought about her mother, who'd left Guangzhou for California, who'd built a business from nothing, who'd taught Maya that heritage wasn't something you abandoned, but something you carried forward and transformed. She thought about Eleanor Hartley, who'd preserved a collection for whoever cared enough to honor it. She thought about Lily, growing up understanding that making things connected you to past and future simultaneously. "I'm interested. Let me discuss with my team and my daughter. Can I have a week to decide?" "Take 2 weeks. This is a significant commitment. But Ms. Chun, I should tell you, your story has resonated internationally. Single mother discovers fortune, chooses preservation over profit, rebuilds community around craft and heritage. That narrative is powerful. This exchange program would amplify it, showing how American manufacturing history connects to global traditions." After Rachel left, Maya found Lily in the weaving studio, working on a ribbon that incorporated patterns from 3 different traditions: Chinese cloud motifs, Victorian floral designs, and modern geometric elements that were purely Lily's invention. "Baby, how would you feel about visiting China? Seeing where great-grandma grew up, learning from weavers there, teaching them what you know." Lily's face transformed with excitement. "Really? We could go to China? Could I see the looms great-great-grandma used?" "Maybe. The program would let us learn from Chinese artisans and share what we've built here. It's a big trip, 6 weeks away from home. But we'd come back to the factory. This is still our home. Always. This is our home. But home doesn't mean you never leave. It means you have somewhere to return to, somewhere that holds you even when you're far away." Lily nodded, understanding in the way children understand when adults are explaining something important. "I want to go. I want to learn everything about weaving from everywhere. And then I want to come back and teach other kids, the way Mrs. Catherine teaches me." Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of fabric sizing and childhood shampoo, feeling the solid reality of a life that had stabilized beyond anything she'd imagined 2 years ago. They'd come to Millbrook desperate, nearly homeless, gambling everything on a condemned factory. They'd found treasure, fought legal battles, and built something that honored generations of women who'd believed craftsmanship mattered. The evening before the cultural exchange announcement, Maya hosted a dinner at the factory for everyone who'd helped make this possible. Catherine and Thomas, Angela Reeves, Sarah McKinley, the structural engineer, Pete Brennan, Chief Davies, the seamstresses who'd joined the business, the apprentice weavers who'd committed to multi-year training. They ate at tables set up on the ground floor, surrounded by humming sewing machines and the smell of fresh fabric. Lily had decorated with ribbons she'd woven, bright patterns that caught light and created movement in the air. Thomas stood to give a toast, his voice rough with emotion. Eleanor Hartley told me once that the factory would endure if someone cared enough. Maya Chen cared enough. She fought for this place, preserved its history, and brought manufacturing back to Millbrook. Eleanor would be proud. Your mother would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. And I'm just an old maintenance supervisor who thought he'd seen this building's end. Catherine followed. I worked here for 14 years before the factory closed. Best job I ever had, because I was making things that mattered. When Maya arrived, when she bought this building for $700, I thought she was naive. Turns out she was visionary. She saw what the rest of us had given up seeing, that this place still had value, still had purpose, still had beautiful things to create. Angela raised her glass. To Maya Chen, who turned a $700 investment into a $547 million discovery, and chose preservation over liquidation. You could have sold everything, walked away wealthy, and nobody would have blamed you. Instead, you rebuilt a factory, restored a craft tradition, and proved that quality still matters in a world obsessed with cheapness. Lily tugged Maya's sleeve, whispered, "Can I say something?" Maya nodded, lifting her daughter onto a chair so everyone could see her. "I'm only 8, but I know some things. I know my mama is the bravest person in the world. I know she bought a broken factory because she wanted to give me a home. I know she found treasure and fought mean people to keep it. And I know she's teaching me to make beautiful things like my grandma did, and her grandma, and grandmas all the way back to China. This factory is magic because Mama believes in it. And when Mama believes in something, it comes true." The room erupted in applause. Maya's vision blurred with tears she didn't bother hiding. Lily was right. Belief mattered. Not naive optimism, but stubborn conviction that quality deserved preservation, that craft held value, that making things connected you to something larger than yourself. After dinner, Maya walked through the factory alone, climbing to each floor, remembering how they'd looked 2 years ago. The devastation, the decay, the sense that nothing salvageable remained. On the 4th floor, she stopped at the mural showing women at looms. Someone had added to it recently. New figures painted in the same style, depicting modern weavers including Lily at her loom, Catherine teaching, and Maya herself examining fabric. The addition honored tradition while acknowledging continuation. At the mural's base, small text in fresh paint. Built by hands that honor craft. Maintained by those who respect quality. Abandoned by forces beyond our control. Remembered by any who understand that making matters. Restored by Maya Chen, 2024 to 2026. May this work endure. Maya photographed it, added the image to the collection of documentation she'd maintained since purchasing the property. Documentation that had saved her in court, that would preserve as history for whoever came next, that testified to the importance of recording what mattered before memory faded. Her phone buzzed. Text from Victor, her ex-husband, the first communication in 3 years. Saw the news story about the factory. Lily looks happy. "You did good, Maya. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to help build this with you. V." She stared at the message, feeling emotions she'd thought she'd finished processing. Victor had left when things got hard, when Maya's PTSD from her mother's death had made her difficult to live with, when poverty had strained their marriage beyond survival. He'd chosen escape over endurance. But he'd also given her Lily, which meant something even if everything else had failed. Maya typed back, "Thank you. Lily would like to hear from you sometimes. She remembers you." She didn't add recrimination or bitterness. Some wounds healed better without being reopened. On the ground floor, Lily had fallen asleep on a pile of fabric scraps. Her small body curled around the stuffed rabbit Victor had given her years ago. Maya gathered her daughter gently, carrying her to the small apartment they'd created on the third floor. Proper home now, with furniture and warmth and stability that felt permanent. She tucked Lily into bed, adjusted the night light shaped like a spool of thread, and whispered the words her mother had whispered to her. "You are loved. You are capable. You can make beautiful things. Sleep well, my clever girl." In her own room, Maya sat at the desk she'd built from factory salvage wood and opened her laptop. She'd been drafting something for months, refining it, preparing for a moment that felt right. Tonight felt right. The Hartley Ribbon Factory, a memoir of discovery, preservation, and renewal, appeared at the top of the document. Below, 90,000 words detailing everything. The eviction notice, the desperate auction purchase, the sealed basement, the legal battle, the transformation. Not a fairy tale, but an honest account of how catastrophe and miracle intertwined. She'd write the ending later, when enough time had passed to have perspective. But the middle was mostly complete, ready for the literary agent Angela had connected her with. The one who'd said this story deserved to be shared beyond news articles and documentary treatments. Maya added one final section before closing the file. Epilogue, 2 years later. The factory runs 5 days a week now. We produce custom ribbons for designers, costumers, crafters who value American-made quality. The work will never make us as wealthy as selling the collection would have, but wealth was never the point. The point is making beautiful things, preserving craft, proving that quality matters in a world that's forgotten how to value it. Lily is 8 now, already weaving patterns that make experienced artisans weep with admiration. She carries forward her great-great-grandmother's talent, her grandmother's business sense, my stubborn refusal to give up. She's the future of this factory if she chooses that path. And if she doesn't, if she finds different dreams, that's okay too. Because the gift we've built here isn't about obligation. It's about options, about having choices poverty never allows. Eleanor Hartley preserved a collection worth hundreds of millions because she believed making beautiful things mattered more than money. My mother built a business from nothing because she believed quality deserved to exist even when markets punished it. I bought a factory for $700 because I had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Together, across generations, we've created something that will outlast all of us. Proof that craftsmanship endures, that preservation matters, that making things connects us to past and future simultaneously. The factory that cost $700 is now valued at $15 million, not counting the collection. But its real worth can't be calculated in dollars. It's measured in jobs created, skills preserved, traditions honored, and children learning that beauty doesn't come from factories in distant countries, but from human hands guided by knowledge and care. This is my mother's legacy, Eleanor's legacy. Every woman who worked here and believed her labor mattered. And now it's Lily's legacy too, and mine, and whoever comes next to understand that the most valuable things we can build are the ones money can't measure. The ribbon factory endures. So do we. Maya closed the laptop and walked to the window. Millbrook stretched below, its lights fewer than a city, but sufficient for a town finding new purpose. The factory stood at the center, Victorian brick glowing under streetlights, smoke from the dying operations chimney rising in the cold night air. She'd arrived here desperate, nearly homeless, gambling everything on property nobody wanted. She'd discovered treasure, fought battles, and built something Eleanor Hartley would recognize as honoring her intentions. She'd proven that making beautiful things still mattered, that craft traditions could endure in modern economies, that quality deserved to exist for its own sake. And she'd given Lily something more valuable than money, knowledge, purpose, connection to generations of women who'd refused to let markets determine what had worth. Her daughter would grow up understanding that beauty came from human hands, that skill mattered, that making things connected you to something larger than yourself. The factory would endure. The collection would educate. The craft would continue. And Maya Chen, who'd spent $700 on a condemned building, had transformed catastrophe into something that would outlast them all. She returned to bed, exhausted but content, dreaming of silk ribbons and golden thread, of her mother's hands guiding fabric through machines, of Eleanor Hartley sealing a collection for someone who'd care enough, of Lily's fingers learning patterns that stretched back centuries and forward into futures nobody could predict, but everyone could shape. The factory waited below, patient and permanent, ready for tomorrow's work. Final scene, 1 year later. The dedication ceremony for the Hartley Cultural Heritage Center drew crowds that overwhelmed Millbrook's usual infrastructure. News crews, state officials, textile historians, museum curators, and families who'd once worked in the factory when it produced ribbons for America's wealthiest families. Maya stood on a temporary platform erected in front of the West Wing, now fully restored to Victorian grandeur. Lily beside her, wearing a dress trimmed with ribbon they'd woven together, silk in blue and gold, pattern combining Chinese cloud motifs with American textile traditions. Governor's representative spoke first, praising Maya's vision. The Smithsonian director emphasized the collection's historical importance. Thomas Brennan offered memories of Eleanor Hartley and her determination that the factory's legacy endure. Then Maya stepped to the microphone, 3 years after buying this property for $700, and told the truth. I didn't discover this treasure through cleverness or superior knowledge. I found it through desperation and luck and the basic human need for shelter. I was a broke single mother with nowhere else to go. This factory was the only home I could afford. Everything that followed, the collection, the legal battle, the restoration, the cultural programs, all of it came from one simple fact. I had nothing to lose by trying. Eleanor Hartley preserved these textiles because she believed making beautiful things mattered more than profit. My mother built a business on the same principle. And now we're teaching that principle to a new generation, showing that craftsmanship isn't obsolete, that quality isn't luxury, that making things connects us to our best selves. This center honors everyone who worked here, who believed their labor mattered, who created beauty for its own sake. It honors Eleanor, who trusted the future. It honors my mother, who taught me that heritage is something you carry forward and transform. And it honors Lily and every child learning that human hands can still create value no one can take away. The ribbon cutting followed. Literally, a ceremonial ribbon woven by Lily from silk in the collection stretched across the entrance. Maya and her daughter cut it together, scissors flashing in autumn sunlight, fabric falling away to reveal doors open to everyone. Inside, the museum glowed with carefully lit displays showing 104 years of American textile manufacturing. School groups already waited. Teachers shepherding children past cases holding ribbons that had once decorated the wealthiest families in America and now educated anyone curious enough to look. Catherine found Maya afterward, her eyes bright with tears. Your mother would burst with pride. Eleanor would stand here and nod with satisfaction, knowing her choice to seal that collection led to this moment. Do you think we've honored them properly? Both of them. You've done more than honor them. You've proved they were right to believe making things matters. In a world that tells everyone only technology has value, you've shown that human hands creating beauty still deserves to exist. Lily pulled Maya's sleeve. Mama, the reporter wants to ask us questions. The interview was brief, familiar questions about the discovery, the legal battle, the decision to preserve rather than sell. But one question stopped Maya, made her think before answering. Ms. Chen, what would you say to someone in a similar position, desperate, nearly homeless, facing impossible choices? Maya looked at her daughter, at the factory, at the crowd, celebrating transformation that had seemed impossible 3 years ago. I'd say sometimes the only way forward is through doors that terrify you. Sometimes the choice between catastrophe and possibility is so thin you can't see it until you're standing on the other side. And sometimes the most valuable things we discover are the ones we're never looking for, but recognize as essential the moment we find them. Don't be afraid to gamble when you have nothing left to lose. The risk might be smaller than you think, and the reward might change everything. The day ended with a reception in the factory's 4th floor, beside the mural showing women at looms. Maya stood surrounded by people who'd helped make this possible, watching Lily teach a group of children how to identify different weaving patterns, feeling the satisfaction of work that mattered. Her phone buzzed. Text from Angela Reeves. The publisher offered $400,000 advance for the memoir. They want to rush publication for next summer. Congratulations. You're going to be a best-selling author on top of everything else. Maya laughed despite herself. 3 years ago, she'd had $47.23 in her bank account. Now she owned assets worth over $500 million, ran a successful business, and had book deals materializing. The transformation was so complete it felt surreal, like someone else's life she was borrowing temporarily. But Lily's laughter pulled her back to present reality. Her daughter was real. The factory was real. The work they'd built together was real. Everything else, the money, the attention, the opportunities, those were just tools for doing what mattered. Making beautiful things, preserving craft traditions, proving that quality endured. As the reception wound down, Maya found herself alone on the 4th floor, looking out at Millbrook as evening descended. The town had changed in 3 years. New businesses, stabilized population, sense of possibility where resignation had once dominated. Not entirely because of the factory, but the factory had catalyzed transformation others built on. She thought about the eviction notice that had started everything, the desperate auction purchase, the sealed basement, and its hidden treasure. She thought about Eleanor Hartley's letter trusting the future, about her mother's belief that making things mattered, about Lily's natural talent connecting generations. Most of all, she thought about the question she'd been asked by the reporter. What would you say to someone in a similar position? The truth was simpler than the answer she'd given. You survived. You adapted. You fought. You refused to let poverty or fear or impossible odds determine what you could become. And sometimes, if you were very lucky or very stubborn or both, you discovered that the thing you thought would save you, the $700 factory, was actually just the beginning. That salvation wasn't a destination, but a process. That transformation required daily effort. That building something meaningful took years, not moments. Maya descended to the ground floor where Lily waited, tired but happy, ready to go home. Home! The apartment on the 3rd floor that had running water and heat and stability they'd never take for granted. As they walked through the factory toward their living space, Lily asked, Mama, do you think we'll always live here? I think we'll live here as long as it feels right. If someday you want different adventures, we'll figure that out. But this place will always be part of us, part of our story. Good, because I like it here. I like making things, like learning from Mrs. Catherine, like being where great-grandma's machines work again. It feels like we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Maya pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of fabric sizing and childhood shampoo, feeling the weight of choices that had led them here, from Oakland's desperation to Millbrook's possibility. Yes, baby, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. They climbed to the 3rd floor together, to their apartment overlooking Industrial Avenue, to the home they'd built from $700 and determination and refusal to let catastrophe be destiny. Behind them, the factory settled into evening quiet, machines resting until tomorrow, collection secure in climate-controlled cases, history preserved for whoever came next to learn that making beautiful things still mattered in a world that had forgotten how to value it. The ribbon factory endured. So did they. And that was enough. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.